Chapter 298. Did the terrorists of Che Chun come here? It had been a few minutes since Vicar entered the manor. Since he entered the manor, he had a creepy feeling. Are you scared when you see the tragic dead bodies on the way? But Vera didn't seem to be afraid at all. Even though Vicar knew that there was something inhuman about this woman, he couldn't help persuading her. Miss Vera, you've seen the situation here. Let's retreat. Unexpectedly, Vera frowned at this moment. She sniffed in the air. I smell something disgusting. Vicar looked at the dead body on the ground and nodded subconsciously. Indeed, I also hate the bloody smell. Wait, where are you going? But he could only hear Vera calmly say, I'm talking about the path of the wolf. Wolves? Vicar gave a start, and then his face changed greatly as if he thought of something. You mean wolves? But he didn't need Vera to give him any answer, because in the next moment, a figure indeed broke the wall and rolled on the ground, right in front of Vera and Vicar. It was a werewolf with hair all over his body, as if he had lost his mind. His hands and feet were on the ground, raising his head and grinning. What's this? However, another huge figure slowly walked out of the broken wall at this time. This appearance made Vicar subconsciously think of a miniature version of the Hulk. Is there anyone else in the way? The giant suddenly said with a rough voice. It seemed that he was in a rage, and his voice was like the roar of a prisoner trapped in prison. Obviously, this giant also saw Vicar and Vera. Vicar, you hide first, Vera said calmly at this time, and her pupils gradually changed color. Where are you taking us? Yuri didn't say a word all the way, and Ephraim had lost his patience. 1 minute. If you can't take us there in 1 minute, you'll go to hell. We've arrived. Yuri, who was covered with cold sweat, turned his head slightly. Out of the corner of his eyes, he could only see Ephraim and another man with horrible fighting ability. It's the room in front. There's a secret passage in this manor for the convenience of escape. Tianbai nodded, ordering directly, open the door. Yuri nodded, slowly opening the door of this room. It was a study room. Where's the escape passage? Ephraim asked at this time. Yuri pointed at the desk in the study room. The mechanism is on the desk. Do you see the desk lamp? Move the desk lamp, and you can see the button. The passage is behind the bookcase. Ephraim narrowed her eyes and suddenly said, Very well, move the desk lamp now. Seeing Yuri's hesitation look, Ephraim pointed at the back of his head and said in a low voice, Go. Yuri could only raise his hands, slowly walking toward the desk step by step. When he came to the desk, Yuri turned around and looked at Ephraim and Tianbai. A drop of cold sweat began to slide down from his hair to his neck. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Hurry up, Tianbai snorted, pulling the Benelli M1 in his hand, and the sound of loading was unusually loud. Right at this time, Yuri squatted down, hiding himself under the desk, and opened a drawer of the desk where there was a pistol. In fact, there were weapons hidden in many secret corners of this manor. But as a fake heir, it was impossible for him to know where they were. But obviously, he had found the pistol in the study room long ago. Yuri held the pistol and gasped for breath. He tried his best to calm himself down. How dare you cheat? The sound of footsteps was approaching him step by step. Ah! Yuri suddenly shouted, rushing out from the side of the desk, and pulled the trigger of the pistol. Bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Anna had unknowingly rushed to the front of Luochio and Yuyi, running forward quickly, but she soon stopped, because she finally found that she had overtaken the club boss and Miss Servant Girl. This might be the last thing she wanted, but she had to admit it. Can't you walk faster? Miss Anna, Luochio said calmly. Are you sure you want the next product? Mr. Yuri has less than a month to live. Are you sure you want to use part of your soul to exchange for the money to help him survive this crisis? If I continue to make requests, you will be able to obtain my soul faster. Isn't that what you want to see the most? Anna sneered at this time. Luochio shook his head. No, Miss Anna, you can use the remaining money to buy something better for you. For example, lifespan. Looking at Anna, Luochio said indifferently, Miss Anna, you should know that you should be dead, and the reason why you are still alive is that your soul exchange fee is consumed every second. The more you use, the less lifespan you can buy. Of course, for a person who is supposed to die, even if she uses her soul, the lifespan won't be much. But because of this, the soul exchange fee is particularly precious. Seeing Anna was silent, Luaccio said slowly, "For example, if you could buy 3 years of lifespan, but after these consumption, you only have 2 years left." Of course, I'm just giving an example. Yes. Confirmed. Decided. Can you act now? I see. Luaccio nodded. Then I'll act according to your wish. Luaccio passed by Anna, but he didn't move forward even one step. There was a closed door in front of him, but he just raised his hand at this time. Slowly, he changed the situation inside the door. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang. Only to hear 5 consecutive gunshots in the room. At the moment of the gunshots, Anna suddenly turned back, looking at the door. When the gunshots had completely quieted down, Anna nervously clenched her hands and put them in front of her lips. It was very quiet, very quiet. How much time had passed? She didn't have the courage to move forward even one step, let alone to open the door in front of her. She just looked. How much time had passed? Only to hear a click. That was the sound of the door lock being unlocked, and a figure slowly appeared. Open the door, close the door, that was Yuri. His face was covered with blood, drop by drop, like the paint from the paintbrush. His eyes were empty, and the gun in his hand was pointed vertically at the ground. He walked like this, step by step, as if he was dragging his own body. He could only see this corridor, even if there were 3 other figures in this corridor. But no matter Luaccio, the maid, or even Anna, they were all in a state of being invisible. He still walked like this step by step. He didn't know that someone was watching him when he passed by Anna. She knew that he couldn't see her, so she stretched out her palm, wanting to stroke the scattered hair on his face or wipe the blood on his face. But she didn't dare. Her fingers stopped in the air. She let him walk by her like this, like a walking dead, until he finally disappeared in this corridor. She got through this danger, until she covered her lips with both hands, trying to block the cry, until she weakly leaned against the wall, until she looked at Luaccio, saying sadly like a child, "How I want to tell him, I never wanted to kill him. How I want to tell him, but I can't let him know, I can't let him know that his revenge is meaningless. Because I know, from the moment I chose to shoot, from the moment I met him in front of the art gallery." Chapter 299. It seems to have stopped, or it didn't stop. Yuri didn't know. He just subconsciously walked into the studio. The second painting, The Nameless Maiden, was painted here. In fact, he had spent a lot of time here before the start of the second auction. Yuri grabbed a bottle of wine that he didn't know the name of. After biting open the oak cork, he drank it quickly and fiercely. He sat down on the chair. About 30 minutes or 40 minutes ago, he was taken away by Edgar from here. But now, Efim was dead, and the man with the hood, whose name he didn't even know, was also dead. In this manner, probably many people died. Yuri slowly closed his eyes. A few minutes ago, the scene of shooting and killing people flashed through his mind. "You dared cheat?" Efim snorted. He also thought that this guy would play some tricks. But compared with that, Efim hoped that Yuri could take him to find the heir of the Typica family, the guy who made him fall into such a situation. "You're dead." Efim snorted. Tianzue didn't say anything. Compared with Efim, he was more willing to clean up the obstacles and send Efim, who was like a human-shaped wild boar, away in the shortest time to complete the task. The loaded Benelli M1 shotgun was pointed straight at the desk. For him, there was no need to wait for the person to be exposed. The split bullets were enough to directly penetrate the person and the desk. Killing people was more like a daily behavior for him. When he was hungry, he needed to eat. When he needed to kill, then he would kill. With a slight pull of his finger, he had already felt the backward movement of the trigger. At this time, Yuri suddenly roared and rushed out from behind the desk. "He's quite brave," Tianzue faintly thought. But even so, this guy would be shot into a hornet's nest. It's so boring. This delivery task. In an instant, Tianzue thought of many things, but at the same time, his entire body was filled with an unprecedented fear. He didn't know where this feeling of fear came from. The only thing he knew was that his body, from his eyelids to his finger that was pulling the trigger, had completely stiffened at this moment. His body was also stiff. Only his thoughts, at this time, seemed to accelerate infinitely, reaching a state of high-speed operation. But he still couldn't move his body. He could even clearly see the bullet fired from Yuri's pistol and then accurately shot between his eyes. He felt pain, an experience that he had never experienced before. The things that appeared in Heavenly Crime's mind seemed to have reached their limits at this moment. Finally, he thought of the essence of this situation, a revolving door. Every movement seemed to have been slowed down countless times. Tianzui's body fell straight backwards. The moment he landed, the elasticity of his muscles even made his body bounce slightly. It raised the dust hidden in the carpet of the study. Bang, bang, bang. 3 or 4 gunshots. This was the last sound he heard in this world. Why couldn't he move? He didn't know. He only knew that the lighting on the ceiling of this study seemed to be quite beautiful. Tianzui died. Where was Ephim? At this time, Ephim opened his eyes wide, and his hands subconsciously covered his stomach. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't block the bright red liquid that flowed out of his body. His body suddenly twitched. He stretched out his hands, seeming to find something to support his body, but he didn't find it. Yes, he didn't find it, so he fell to the ground. One of the bullets even penetrated his chest. Ephim opened his eyes wide. That was a kind of terrifying look before death. In fact, he couldn't see anything, only darkness in front of him. But he could feel that Yuri was beside him. Ephim suddenly grabbed Yuri's clothes with his blood-stained palms and pulled them. Both of their eyes were extremely wide open. Their heavy auras were like gunpowder that could explode at any moment, like needles against wheat. You want to have a good time? My end. Blood gushed out from Ephim's mouth. Is your end? I curse you. I curse you. Yuri abruptly opened his eyes. Ephim's eyes seemed to be less than 10 centimeters away from his eyes before he died, as if he was still watching him. Both of them are dead. He held his forehead with his hand and suddenly laughed. His laughter was low and deep, and as he laughed, it seemed to turn into the sound of crying. My end is your end. This sentence actually came true. It wouldn't take long for Yuri to know that he would close his eyes forever. He suddenly recalled the day he came to this city, and then the days after that, one day after another. If one were to say that he really had a talent, then perhaps it was this talent that had caused all of this. Was there no shortcut to success? Was Anna abominable? But if he hadn't come to this city for more than a year and was still mediocre and eager for a chance, he wouldn't have agreed to fake it so easily. Blame himself? Was he wrong? Should he be a street painter down to earth? Would he succeed in the end? But now his enemies were all dead, and he didn't have much life left. What could he do with the remaining time? Enjoy crazily, and enjoy the life of a rich man to the extreme before he died? Then how painful would it be before he died? Counting his remaining time day by day. How painful would it be? Suddenly, Yuri absent-mindedly raised the pistol that was still in his hand. He knew there was still a bullet left here, and his gaze was like a patient suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Slowly, Yuri opened his mouth and gradually inserted the muzzle into his temple. He finally closed his eyes and then buckled his fingers. In the face of counting down his life, he chose to end himself. Bang! It was over. It was over. But he could still open his eyes, and there was no pain as he imagined. He could still see everything around him so clearly. Yuri subconsciously turned his head. He realized that a palm had appeared on his face at some point in time, and the owner of the palm was the boss of the club. The power of this 6-magazine pistol is indeed not bad. From Boss Luo's palm, a bullet slowly fell to the ground. Yuri subconsciously looked at the bullet that fell to the ground and couldn't help but reveal a trace of anger. Why did you stop me? You can take away my soul without waiting for the end of the time. Don't you want to? If you peek into the future, neither you nor I will know. Luochio said softly. What will happen in the future will be known. For example, overlay transaction. What? Yuri showed a blank look. At this time, Luochio gently snapped his fingers, and Yuri closed his eyes and directly fell to the ground. At this time, Anna slowly walked out from behind Luaccio. She squatted down and reached out to touch Yuri's face. It seems that Miss Anna really loves Mr. Yuri. She even made such a request. Luaccio said softly. Anna raised her head and shook it. Do you know what love is? Luaccio gave a start. It seemed to be the first time that someone asked him such a question. He shook his head directly. Really? Anna smiled slowly. But I think I shouldn't love this man. But anyway, I feel that I owe him. Anna took a deep breath. Isn't it ridiculous? I clearly know that before all this happened, his love for me. I thought I could let myself fall in love with him, at least as a compensation, or just a response. But later I understood that this was not love at all, and I shouldn't be loved. I just felt guilty. She stood up. Then I planned to do something to really compensate him. Since I should have died, and him finally died in Yuri's hands, although it was a bit different from what I expected. Anna shook her head. You know what? I actually had a lot of chances to kill him directly. She showed a very coquettish smile. After all, in my opinion, this guy was still very obsessed with my body, but killing him directly was not what I wanted. If he died, the mining area would only have one owner at most. If there was no way to dig out the connection between the owner and the mining area, and let the public opinion of this country completely wash away the filth between them, the next one would come after the death of Ephraim, and there would be no end at all. But since Ephraim died, I should also die. Then let's put an end to this matter. Anna looked at Yuri on the ground, faintly saying, after all, he's just a poor person who was implicated. He can actually pursue his own dream. And I believe that with his talent, as long as he's given enough time, he'll shine and become a very good painter. You can also choose to achieve your original goal. Boss Luo suddenly said. Anna chuckled. She just felt ridiculous. You're really a weirdo. You've repeatedly provided me with choices that I shouldn't refuse for the sake of my interests. You seem to be very willing to see me make all the choices that are beneficial to me. Luaccio said indifferently, because we're on the side of customers. Then you're a failure as a boss. Anna shook her head. Some things, people just like to do things that harm themselves and benefit others. I see. Luaccio nodded. He slightly opened his hands in front of him, and an old sheepskin scroll appeared out of thin air. It slowly floated to Anna, and then opened. If Miss Anna feels there's no problem with the requirements on the contract, you can sign it. Anna gently pressed her palm on the contract. Master, are you unhappy? Miss Maid saw that her master was a little bit silent at this time. She accompanied Luaccio to stand at the highest position of the manor and watched what happened below for several minutes. But Boss Luo didn't say a word. The thoughtful Miss Maid quickly thought that he could always intervene in some subtle things to make some changes in the previous time. But this time, he didn't seem to intervene too much. Unhappy. Luaccio turned his head and looked at Yu Yi curiously. Why? Miss Maid said softly, because the quality of Miss Anna's soul hasn't changed much since the moment she was rescued. If I have to say, it's even decreased a little, right? Luaccio smiled. We've been together for some time. I'm not the type to scold you when I hear something bad. Yes, Master's tolerance towards me is something that makes me happy. Yi softly responded and then hesitated. But Miss Anna's contract, of course, according to the customer's request. Luaccio slowly said, first of all, deal with the matter of this manor. Boss Luo seemed to cheer up all of a sudden, chuckling. At the beginning, I thought that the werewolf and the medicine man wouldn't be finished so quickly. Not only that, but also a new character. Yi casually looked at Tianbai, Yelgo, and Vera on the ground. She didn't think there was anything interesting about this ridiculous fighting force. However, since her master was showing an expression of interest, as an excellent maid, she should accompany him, be happy with him, and even give him some entertainment. Master, look, this Miss Vera seems to have learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Her movements are... For Vera, encountering such an obviously abnormal guy was not something to be happy about, especially when there was another person in the group. Well, perhaps he was also the kind of guy who couldn't control the wolf bloodline in his body well. He should have completely lost his mind now. Vera quickly looked at Yelgo, who was completely in a beast state, and then looked at the giant in front of her. This is too exciting. Vera quickly shuttled through the manor. Yes, she had memorized the structure of this manor when she was here last time. Obviously, she didn't get lost this time. But what was worse than getting lost was that she had to fall into a weird, chaotic fight with the giant and the wolf who had lost his mind. However, she had no choice but to admit that she was the weakest among the three of them if she did not use the power that she thought was dirty when facing the strange giant that possessed inhuman strength and the wolf that had lost its rationality. If you weren't a wolf, I wouldn't care about this matter. Vera quickly glanced at the guy who pounced on the giant and crazily bit him, frowning and thinking. Then where was it? The studio? Chapter 300. Police Station. The man lowered his head and sat on the simple bed in the detention room. These days were like a nightmare for him. As the heir of the Typica family, he was caught here. If the news spread, it would be a big joke. Suddenly, the door of the detention room opened. The man looked at the policeman who came in. He couldn't remember the number of times he shouted these days. At this moment, he just looked at the policeman silently, with a rather lazy attitude. "You could go now," the policeman said indifferently. The man was stunned and suddenly stood up from the bed, saying with surprise, "I can go now. Is there someone coming to pick me up?" "Pick you up? Who'll pick you up?" The policeman shrugged. "It's just that the real thief was caught." "Well, don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and go. Don't waste our space." The man suddenly got angry. "You caught the wrong person. How dare you?" But he had to stop talking immediately because the policeman knocked on the door with his baton. "If you want to stay here, I'll be happy to close the door again." "Wait. I'll go now. This police station, I'll remember it." The man lowered his head and quickly walked down the stairs of the police station. He felt that he was extremely unlucky. Not only did his wallet, ID card, mobile phone, and so on all disappeared, but he also sat in prison for such a long time inexplicably. What the hell is Edgar doing? I've been missing for such a long time. Why didn't he look for me? Humph. He found a taxi, got in, and gave an address in an extremely displeased manner. For Vera, being a busybody seemed to be a gene passed down from her ancestors. She even clearly remembered that when she was a child, people in her family all commented on her grandmother like this. "Damn, busybody old woman." This time, she seemed to think that she had to pay the bill for being a busybody. This situation was really terrible. This studio, which seemed to have been set up not long ago, now looked like it had been hit by a typhoon. Two guys with extraordinary physical strength were fighting here, and she, a busybody, was sandwiched between them. Vera thought that the owner of this manor wouldn't ask her for compensation. Bang! Damn it! She crossed her arms in front of her to protect herself, barely blocking the fist of this giant. However, the huge impact immediately sent her flying towards the wall. If it weren't for the dirty blood in his body that made his body structure different from that of ordinary people, this punch would have broken the bones in his hands. But now he had lost all feeling from his wrists to his shoulders. Basically, he was numb from his wrists to his shoulders. Pa! Tap! Her body fell directly on top of a cabinet placed on the wall and smashed it into pieces. This seemed to be a place used to store painting tools. Broken brushes, crushed paint, and bottles were scattered all over the floor. A sticky feeling made Vera feel extremely uncomfortable. She subconsciously glanced at her own reflection in the shattered glass on the ground. It turned out that because of this, her face was stained with thick white paint. There was a puddle on his nose, a puddle on his left cheek, a puddle on his forehead, and even a puddle on his right eye. Oh, right, there was also a puddle at the corner of his mouth. But now was not the time for her to care about or deal with these things. It was more important to think about how to deal with this giant and this wolf. I shouldn't meddle in other people's business. Vera abruptly stood up and said to herself with extreme dissatisfaction. Then, her pupils began to quickly wrap around her body in a miraculous change. His pupils seemed to have been shattered and then reassembled, turning into a marvelous umbrella-shaped structure with a unique sense of beauty. As for his cheeks, tiny silver hairs appeared. Her ears were slightly elongated, but her hair had suddenly grown to her waist. "Are you also a wolf?" Tianbai's voice was full of a kind of rough, as if his vocal cords were burned, and he was furious. This change was not something he could control. He had to sacrifice a lot of things to exchange for a strong physical ability. A ruthless killing intent had already broken out of his heart. He needed to tear apart all the living things in front of him to calm down the endless impulse in his body. At this time, just at the moment when Vera changed, Yelgo, who had lost his mind, suddenly stopped. As if facing a more dangerous enemy, he bent his body and grasped the floor with his limbs, as if facing a formidable enemy. Or there was a trace of instinctive fear. 10 seconds. Vera's voice suddenly became a little sharper. When her eyes suddenly narrowed, she was like a bullet. In a single leap, she was already charging straight at Tianbai. Tianbai also roared. He had caught the opponent's movement pattern, so his intention was very obvious. That was, he could smash anything with one punch. This punch now indeed had the power to break the wall. However, at this moment, all the movements seemed to be slowed down. Vera did not retreat. Instead, she quickly reached out and grabbed Tianbai's huge wrist. Then her body quickly twisted in the air, and she opened her legs at the same time, and then tightened them instantly. Her left calf and right thigh turned into slender pliers, directly clasping Tianbai's neck. She shouted in a low voice and directly pulled Tianbai down to the ground. As for Tianbai's head, it directly hit the floor heavily. Even though such a terrifying collision wasn't able to shatter Tianbai's skull, he was already seeing stars. But Vera obviously did not stop. She tightened her legs even more ferociously, and at the same time grabbed Tianbai's arm and suddenly pushed it in the opposite direction. Crack! The joint was completely twisted. Because of this, Tianbai began to feel that it was difficult to maintain his breathing. In this state, although he had reduced his pain to almost no degree, he still needed oxygen to maintain himself. Ordinary people could not force him to this extent. But Vera was obviously not an ordinary person. Strangle, a more powerful move in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the time was 9 seconds. Vera loosened her legs and stood up from the ground. She roared in a low voice, lifted her leg, and kicked Tianbai over. After seeing his completely white eyes, she turned to look at Yelgo. He was still in a defensive posture with his body tightened. Vera walked towards Yelgo step by step, and the change in her body became more and more obvious. Yelgo instinctively retreated until he had nowhere to retreat. The hidden fierceness in his body finally made him roar, and suddenly attacked Vera. "You don't know how to use this power." Vera's voice became sharper. She held her hands together, easily avoiding Yelgo's collision, and turned to his back. She fiercely hit Yelgo's back with her fist and directly beat him to the ground. Vera snorted coldly and directly knelt on Yelgo's back. Then she stretched out her hand to pull his head and completely suppressed him. "Vicar, come out, come out." Vicar, who had been hiding from the beginning and chasing Vera, now stuck his head out from the window of the studio. Seeing Vera's scene, he suddenly turned pale with fright and hurriedly rummaged through his pocket. Finally, he found a bottle and hurriedly threw it out. Vera stretched out her hand to take the spelling word and directly bit it open. She took out some small pills, stuffed them into Yelgo's mouth, and finally covered his mouth with her strength. Yelgo was still desperately struggling. "Listen, anger will not become your power, and it will kill you. I don't know where the blood in your body came from, but since you have this dirty thing in your body, you have to learn to control it. You are a human, not a beast. Woo, roar." Until Yelgo gradually stopped moving, the change in his body began to fade away, and finally closed his eyes. Vera released him and sat on the ground by herself. Suddenly, her face showed a kind of pain, and her lips suddenly became pale. She quickly put the rest of the pills in her hand into her mouth. Soon after, she returned to her original state, but seemed to have overdrawn all her strength and collapsed on the ground. Seeing this, Vicar quickly climbed through the window, walked in, and quickly said, "I just saw a lot of dead people along the way. I didn't see any living ones. What's wrong with this guy?" He immediately shifted his gaze to Tianbai. At this time, Tianbai's body began to become shriveled. Shriveled was relative to his previous huge body size, and now he just returned to his normal laughing state. However, his skin all turned into a strange gray, and even some black substance flowed out from his mouth. Perhaps it was blood? I don't know, but Vera frowned and said weakly, I seem to have seen something similar. About 2 years ago, several mysterious guys came to our house, and my father received them. They seemed to be talking about some business. Vera shook her head. Not long after, I accidentally found that our family began to secretly dispose some corpses, which looked. She was silent for a moment, and then slowly said, almost. Well, Vicar frowned, and quickly said, don't worry about it. I'll take you out of here first. If there are similar guys, I'm sure I can't deal with them. Vera nodded. She also knew the importance. Wait, take this guy with you. I have something to ask him. Vera pointed at Yelgo and said, Miss, do you think I still have the ability to lift this guy with your help? Vicar said with a bitter face, You've already helped him to this extent, and the rest depends on his own luck. If he's a member of this manor, he won't die. Well, Vera had to nod. Is it because it's an ancient bloodline, so it's more powerful? In the messy studio, Boss Luo and Miss Maid, who were clean, welcomed them. Squatting on the ground, Luochio turned over Yelgo's body and asked while looking at him. There's a saying of generation in the wolf's community. Yi said what she knew. For example, the first generation is the first generation, and then the first generation is infected by the first generation, and the first generation is infected by the second generation. The previous generation is born with a sense of oppression to the next generation. Well, the pattern of similar bloodline is similar. Luochio walked to the front of Tianbai's body and stretched out his finger to touch some of the black blood on the ground. He rubbed it and suddenly said, By the way, last time you said that this thing contains the blood of bloodline and the brain of werewolf, right? Yes. Luochio nodded. Thinking of what Vera just said, it seemed to be a hypothesis. He smiled and stood up. It's our turn to clear the place. We should thank Miss Vera because she saved us some time. It was the first time that Luochio encountered so many corpses, or, in other words, he stood in a place where many people died. In the past, even if he wouldn't be scared, he would probably become nervous. But now, these were like props, and the spring water in his heart had no ripples. Boss Luo couldn't help but think that it was interesting and self-deprecating. It seems that even the process of getting used to it has been eliminated. Yes, Yi smiled slightly. But before clearing the place, Miss Maid took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped the black blood on Boss Luo's finger. At this time, a taxi slowly came to the entrance of the manor. Chapter 301. But the old taxi driver obviously didn't believe such an excuse. He rolled down the window and looked at the man suspiciously. Sir, what if you don't come out after going in? What should I do? You don't look like a person who can live here. The old taxi driver was stopped at the entrance of the police station, so he couldn't help but be suspicious. What did you say? I'm the owner here. Humph. The man frowned and snorted. You wait. After that, he walked directly to the pillar in front of the gate and pressed the doorbell. If he hadn't lost everything on him, he wouldn't have taken a taxi back. On the way here, he borrowed the phone from the driver, but he couldn't get through to Edgar's phone, which made him uneasy. The doorbell rang for a while, but there was no response. The taxi driver had already gotten out of the car and walked towards the man. Sir, I think no matter how long you press the button, there won't be a response. However, a free taxi isn't so easy to sit in, do you know? What do you want to do? The man snorted. Perhaps it was because he had always been in a high position, but after this shout, the taxi driver's expression suddenly changed, and he instantly stopped in his tracks. The man felt that his momentum had overwhelmed the other party, so he couldn't help but sneer. Unexpectedly, at this time, the taxi driver turned around and ran back to his car without saying a word. He directly reversed the car, turned around, and drove away at full speed. The man was stunned. He didn't think that he could frighten people to this extent. The man subconsciously turned around and saw that on the iron gate of the gate, there was a guy in a white suit, but his body was stained with blood. He was lying there. His arm passed through the iron gate, just enough to support his body, but his head was hanging down and his body was motionless. Seeing this, the man was suddenly frightened. He suddenly understood why the driver left so hurriedly. The man gathered his courage and walked to the front of the gate, holding up the man's head. Soon, he recognized his name. What happened in the manor? This was something he desperately wanted to know. The man pushed hard and found that the gate wasn't locked. He couldn't help but hesitate for a moment. He gritted his teeth and took a pistol from the corpse's hand. After swallowing his saliva, he slowly entered the manor. Along the way, the man saw many corpses, and these corpses were all the corpses of his subordinates. The luxurious villa in the manor was extremely quiet. Pushing open the door, he didn't see anyone. The man couldn't help but shout, "Edgar! Edgar! Are you there? Edgar! Are you there?" Boom! As if he had bumped into something, the man abruptly turned around and pointed the pistol in front of him. He shouted, "Who is it?" "Ah, young master." She saw a man holding her arm, leaning against the corner and slowly standing up. "You're okay, that's great." "Oh, I've finally seen a living one." The man's face lit up, and he hurriedly walked over to support the guy. "Tell me, what happened here?" However, before he could finish speaking, he heard the familiar voice of his old butler. "Sir, you're here." Edgar hurriedly walked down from the corridor. His clothes were very messy, but his hairstyle didn't seem to be messy. "Fortunately, you're okay. After I woke up, I found the corpses of Ephraim and his subordinates in the study." "Sir, it was you who killed them." "Me?" The man was stunned, showing an extremely puzzled expression. His mind seemed to be full of cobwebs, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. "Edgar, listen to me. These days Sir, I don't think it's the right time to talk about this." The old butler said seriously, "I've informed Brubov and told him what happened here. Listen, Mr. Brubov means that he will only give us half an hour to clean this place up properly." "Brubov." The man was even more confused. "Wait, I did come to Moscow this time to see Brubov for cooperation, but when did I see him?" "Oh, my poor sir, didn't you talk with Brubov before the first auction and make a plan to kill Ephraim?" The old butler frowned at this time. "Is it because of the impact caused by the explosion of the grenade that confused your memory?" The man was stunned. His intuition told him that something strange happened here that he couldn't explain. He instinctively wanted to find out what happened in the middle and was about to speak. But at this time, he suddenly had a feeling of dizziness. This feeling of dizziness caused many images to flash through his eyes, like a movie, and it was the kind of 120-frame movie. The man then fell into a coma. "Sir, sir, sir." Feeling some pain on his face, Yelgo slowly woke up. The moment he opened his eyes, he even saw a familiar face. "Mr. Victor." Yelgo grabbed Victor's arm happily. "That's great. You're all right. I've been looking for you. Where the hell did they lock you up?" Victor was stunned and subconsciously thought it seemed that the people in the manor didn't tell Yelgo about his whereabouts, but just locked him up. "Calm down." Victor patted Yelgo's shoulder. "Let's talk about my matter later. Compared to this, can you tell me what happened here?" "Oh, I don't know. It seems that this place was attacked, so I escaped in the chaos. I was on a look for you." Yelgo recalled and said, "Mr. Victor, there are too many firearms here, and many people were killed by the fire. I think we should call for reinforcements as soon as possible." "Yelgo." Unexpectedly, Victor shouted a little loudly at this time. "Let's talk about those things later. I just need you to tell me what happened to this guy." Victor pointed with his finger. Yelgo couldn't help turning his eyes, only to see a corpse lying on the ground in this chaotic room. His whole body was like a gray mummy, with black blood flowing out of his mouth and blood vessels on his face, which looked extremely horrible. This was the guy who killed people. Yelgo finally clearly remembered something that happened before. This guy seemed to become extremely horrible after he injected something into his body. Yelgo wasn't sure what the man injected into his body was, but it was obviously not a good thing. But how did this guy die? Yelgo couldn't help but feel frightened. He knew that he must have instinctively entered a state that he didn't want others to know because of the excessive danger. Once he entered that state, He would lose his mind and couldn't remember what he had done. Did he kill this guy with that horrible power when he lost his mind? Yelgo looked at some obvious claw marks on this guy's body. It seemed that perhaps this was the only conclusion he could draw. Thinking that he would cause some horrible destruction when he lost his mind, Yelgo couldn't deny this conclusion. Did you kill this guy? Victor asked with a frown. Yelgo hesitated. I think, maybe, I don't remember clearly. Sir, I fainted later, so I can't remember. Thank you for your hard work. Victor nodded, but suddenly said, but don't tell anyone about this corpse for the time being, and don't mention it in the report. I'll find someone to deal with this corpse. In short, you have to keep it a secret. Seeing Victor's serious look, Yelgo hesitated for a moment, and finally chose to nod. He got up. By the way, Mr. Victor, they didn't do anything to you, right? Victor smiled. He looked at this young guy and knew that he really cared about him. So he couldn't help saying gently, it's okay. Everything is solved. It's settled? When Yelgo walked out of the room, he found that a lot of policemen came to the manor. But it seemed that there weren't many corpses as he remembered. Only 4 corpses were placed in the hall of the villa. There was only one corpse inside, and it belonged to someone from the manor, and it was only a gardener. As for the other 3, they were Ephim and the 2 gangsters who kidnapped Ephim earlier. What the hell happened? Baby Yelgo was dumbfounded. Do you feel better? Vicar took Vera to a grove far away from the manor and found a stream here. He put her aside to have a rest. In fact, he was really tired. For a warrior whose weapons were keyboards and codes, this kind of physical labor was terrible. I'm okay. Vera nodded and recovered a little strength. Vicar breathed a sigh of relief and suddenly sat on the grass. I heard a siren just now. Maybe the police came. Fortunately, we left quickly, or it would be really troublesome. Thank you for your hard work. I'll give you a raise. Vera smiled and stretched out her fist. Vicar also stretched out his fist and gently knocked on Vera's fist. They looked at each other and smiled. By the way, help me get some water. I want to wipe my face. There's a lot of paint on my face, Vera said as if she thought of something. Although Vicar knew that his boss, who paid his salary, was a person who loved beauty, he still couldn't help but ask, My lady, when did you get paint on your face? At most, it's just a little bit of dust. No. Vera was stunned. She subconsciously touched her face and obviously felt the discomfort and coarseness caused by the paint. Is there really no paint on my face? I'm talking about white paint. No. Vera frowned and then quickly relaxed. She suddenly squinted and said happily, I think I know what trick they used to steal the nameless maiden from the gallery silently. You're still thinking about this? Chapter 302. Yuri felt a headache. As for the reason of the headache, he thought it was probably because he drank too much last night. It seemed that he had become more and more dependent on alcohol recently, but he still didn't open his eyes. He just used his hand to gently press his forehead and then sniff the air that filled his surroundings. It was a kind of oppressive and even a little stinky. The salary of the art gallery was very low, and the monthly purchase of paints, brushes, and drawing paper was not a small expense. He could only rent a dull and dark basement like this. It's already so late. Looking up at the alarm clock placed in front of the bed, Yuri had no choice but to hurriedly get up and randomly look for clothes on the ground. The clothes were thrown on the ground like garbage. A single man was probably like this, and a single and poor man was even more like this. He finally found a piece of clothes that didn't smell much. After putting it on casually, he opened the door of the basement. 1 copy of the newspaper, 1 copy of the coffee, 1 copy of the sandwich. The total is, here you are. As usual, Yuri ate his breakfast while getting on the bus to the gallery. He couldn't help but feel a little lucky that he found a place to sit on the bus at this time. The Nameless Maiden is officially hung up today, and the art gallery is also open as usual. When Yuri casually opened the newspaper that night, he was surprised to see such a piece of news on one side. However, regarding the content of the news, he felt as if he had fallen into another world after sleeping for a while. The date of the newspaper was right. It was indeed today. He subconsciously bit his lips. Well, there was pain, so it shouldn't be a dream. But as an employee who worked in an art gallery. Even though he was only responsible for cleaning the outer wall, why didn't he know that the nameless maiden was stolen? And it happened many days ago. Damn it. Yuri controlled his temper and read the content of the newspaper all the way. The nameless maiden was actually stolen by a very famous counselor in the city. The police got a clue and directly found the stolen painting in the counselor's home. As for the method of theft, it was not reported. Later, the police arrested the councilman, but during the transportation process, the criminal councilman was robbed at gunpoint. At that time, the escaped prisoners and criminals broke into a manor in the suburbs and had a conflict with the owner of the manor. In self-defense, the owner of the manor killed a total of 3 people, including the prisoner, Councilman Ephraim. As for the stolen paintings, they had been returned to the art gallery and were officially reopened to visitors today. What the hell? Yuri really felt that what was written in the newspaper was nonsense. So many things had happened, but he had no recollection of them at all. His head was still a little heavy, which made him wonder if he had been so drunk last night that he had forgotten so many things. But that wasn't right. Even if the video was blacked out, there was no reason to forget what had happened for some time. He subconsciously continued to rub his forehead. The discomfort after waking up from the hangover lasted until the bus arrived at the station. However, when Yuri arrived at the station, he saw that there were many more tourists in front of the art gallery. They were all waiting for the art gallery to open. What's in the newspaper? Is it true? Yuri murmured, glancing at the time. He found that he had passed the working time. For this reason, he had to do something that he often did. That was to get into the sewer outside the art gallery. It just led to a place inside the art gallery. Of course, the exit over there had been blocked long ago. It was just that he had been cleaning this place for some time and had accidentally discovered this passage. So, anyway, after that, even if he missed the working time, no one noticed that he was late. It seemed that it was time to open the door. Before Yuri had time to go to the staff room to change his work clothes, he was forced to hide aside by the tourists who came in. Yuri, you're here again. At this time, Yuri heard someone calling his name. It was a staff member in the art gallery. His name seemed to be... He forgot it. Anyway, he didn't pay much attention to it. I'm going to change my clothes. But you see... Yuri pointed to the guests. I can't go there at all. But I did come on time. You see, I'm already here. The staff said indifferently. I don't care whether you're late or not. In fact, even if you're late, I won't care about you. Don't tell me you've forgotten that you've been fired for some time. What? I said, you've been fired. Yuri, I tell you, if you enter the art gallery properly, we won't care about you. But if you continue to sneak in like this, we'll have to call the police next time. The staff said seriously, now leave immediately. Don't waste my feelings for you, because we used to work together. Tell me clearly. What fired? Who fired me? I was still at work yesterday. Why did you fire me? Yuri couldn't help but rush forward. The staff stepped back in disgust. You stink. How much did you drink? Please, walk on the street when you're sober. Tell me clearly. The staff waved his hand at this time. 2 security guards immediately came up and dragged Yuri out of the art gallery. Let me go. Let me go. In front of the art gallery, Yuri was pushed away. One of the security guards said, Go, don't let me see you again. How many times do you think you've seen me this month? Every time you pretend to stand in front of those famous paintings, do you really think you're an artist? Who will look at those rubbish paintings you usually draw? What did you say? Are you going or not? We can start now. The 2 security guards puffed out their chests at the same time. Yuri was stunned and spat angrily. You're illegally firing me. I'll definitely report you to the labor department. Wait, Yuri took a deep breath before he turned around and left. He was still in a state of disbelief. Before walking out of the art gallery, Yuri subconsciously looked back and then looked at the newspaper he bought in the morning. He suddenly crumpled the newspaper into a ball and threw it in front of the art gallery, shouting loudly, Listen, one day I'll hang my paintings inside. It's okay, well, my job is okay now. Don't worry, I'm in good health. Girlfriend? I don't have any plans for now. Well, I know, mother. I haven't written to my parents in my hometown for a while. Yuri stood alone under an old building, silently listening to his family's nagging. Well, I'll stop talking I'm going to start working. I love you, Mother. Yuri put the phone into his pocket. He said he would report to the labor department, but in fact, it was just a waste of time. If he had the energy, he might as well find a new job as soon as possible. He hadn't paid this month's rent yet. The sky above Moscow was still so fresh, just like when he first came here. At that time, he still had dreams. He used up all the money he brought from home, but no one appreciated the works he sold. In the end, he could only paint portraits for passers-by on the streets to earn some living expenses. He remembered that half a year ago, when it was still cold and snowing, he almost froze to death on the streets. He put his hands in his pockets, walking aimlessly on the street, no longer thinking about why he was fired. What he needed to think about was how to continue his life in the future. Dreams can't be eaten. Yuri couldn't remember who had said such words. Perhaps he really didn't have any talent and was only relying on impulse to support the so-called dream. But now he couldn't eat 3 meals and had no clothes and food. It was time to consider giving up his dream. He couldn't remember how he came to this place. Yuri stopped his footsteps. Perhaps because he was too focused on the problem, he actually came to this place again. On one side of the old building with red bricks. Yuri stood like this for a long time, silently looking at the distorted city pattern on the mottled wall. He always felt a little ridiculous. At that time, how did he insist on painting here every day in such a cold winter? But he had an impulse to fill in the last lines that he finally gave up. Anyway, he was free today and didn't need to work. Yuri found a stone on the ground, then walked to the wall and closed his eyes. After a while, he began to work. He used the edges of the stone to draw a series of light, white marks on the wall. When he gave up at that time, it was almost completed, but now he just added some missing things, which seemed to not take much time or a long time. It seems that something is still missing. Suddenly, a slightly low voice came from behind. Yuri subconsciously turned around, only to find that a man had appeared behind him without him noticing. He wore a cap, a mask, and sportswear, probably a morning jogger. But he felt that he had seen this man somewhere before. "Who are you?" The morning jogger's mask shook a little, and he seemed to smile. "Do you have a dream?" "Dream?" Yuri gave a start. The morning jogger said, "You forgot. Last winter, I asked you why you didn't burn the charcoal in your hand to keep warm in such a cold day." Yuri smiled with a complicated expression. "Now, I think I will burn the charcoal in my hand." The morning jogger seemed to be stunned, and then nodded, whispering, "In that case, it's really a pity." Yuri shrugged, looking up at this huge graffiti, and said indifferently, "Not necessarily. Anyway, no one will like this thing. I won't disturb you." The morning jogger said politely. Yuri nodded subconsciously, and when a morning jogger was about to turn around, he subconsciously stopped him. "Wait, can you do me a favor?" "Mister, what's the matter?" Yuri didn't know whether it was an illusion or not, but he felt that the other party's voice was a little cold. But he didn't care too much. "If possible, can you help me?" "Help?" "Yes, a little to the left, a little more, okay, right here. Don't move. I'll be done soon." Under the old wall, the morning jogger stretched out his shoulder, and Yuri rode on his shoulder so that he could reach a higher position on the wall. He took out some paint tubes from his clothes. This was his habit. He always had some with him. At this time, he squeezed out all the paint from the tube and painted it on the upper left corner of the graffiti with his finger. Lemon yellow, a circle, a sun, a bright yellow sun on the twisted city. Darkness and sunlight looked very strange. But after putting down Yuri, the morning jogger gazed at it for a long time. He suddenly whispered, "Mister, I think you're wrong. That is, it won't be unloved, at least I like it. I think it's finally perfect day." Yuri smiled. "You're really a weird person." He shook his head. "I don't want to talk with you. I'm going to find a new job. Otherwise, I don't even have charcoal next time. Goodbye. I'm glad to meet you again." "Mister, may I know your name?" "Yuri. My name is Yuri. Do you like to draw?" Yuri was silent for a while and shook his head. "I'm not too sure now." The morning jogger suddenly opened his lapel and took out a pen. "Give me your hand." He wrote a phone number on Yuri's palm and told him, "I have a friend who also likes to draw. You can communicate with him. By the way, I suggest you can learn from him." "Well, You can say it's Vladimir Mirovich, an old friend of his in judo class. Judo, I hope to see your work in the future. The morning jogger said indifferently, Mr. Yuri. So it's a rich man. Yuri looked at the phone number written on his palm and watched the morning jogger get on a black car. Isn't the driver a bit too strong? Should be a bodyguard? Yuri thought for a while and felt that it was okay to call this number, so he dialed the number on his palm. Hello, this is Repin Academy of Fine Arts. I'm Professor Apulum. How can I help you? Yuri patted his face subconsciously. Repin Academy of Fine Arts. Former Royal Academy of Fine Arts. Apulum. This is the authority of the arts circle. Vladimir Mirovich. Vladimir Mirovich. Judo? Yuri's heart suddenly beat violently. Could it be him? I'm actually riding on his shoulder. Yuri suddenly turned around, looking at the graffiti on the wall. He suddenly felt that he might be favored by the god of luck today. Hello? 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 Is anyone there? Ah, hello, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. My name is Yuri. Professor Apulum. I'm sorry to call you. Here's the thing, there's a... Luaccio was reading the contents of the parchment in his hand softly. First, let Mr. Yuri forget everything about you and FM, and restore his memory to the time before he knew you. Done. Second, give him a chance to pursue his dream. Done. Thirdly, Mr. Yuri can once again enjoy a maximum of 25 years of lifespan. Well, I'm sorry, Miss Anna, but Mr. Yuri has already made a deal with us before, and your soul transaction fee is not enough to buy back his soul. Even his lifespan can only be increased to 25 years. Gently rolling up the parchment in his hand, Luaccio looked at Anna with a smile in this house that originally belonged to Oleg, and softly said, Excuse me, is the above in line with what Miss Anna wants? That's enough. Anna nodded gently. She looked very calm, so calm that it seemed that there was no difference whether she opened or closed her eyes, and at this time, she slowly closed her eyes. She knew what was waiting for her next. Death. The soul belonged to the other party. She didn't know what the soul looked like, but she knew about death. But after waiting for a while, Anna didn't feel anything wrong with her body. This made her open her eyes in confusion. Miss Anna, I'm curious about one thing. Luaccio asked softly. You said that when FM and the curator of the art gallery conspired to steal the nameless maiden, they actually used a kind of fading paint. Well, the curator secretly painted this special paint on the real painting during the daily maintenance of the painting, and then hung it up again. This kind of paint is quite special. It will go through 2 changes, first appearing and second fading. Well, Luaccio smiled and said, it was still normal when it was hung up, but after being illuminated by a special light, the color appeared, and the painting became the same color as the bottom frame. It looked as if the real painting had disappeared. After that, as long as you report the case and wait for the police to ask, you can take down the painting with only the frame left, and nobody will know. Anna said indifferently, What do you want to say? Nothing. Boss Luo walked a few steps away and came to the living room. There was an easel here. He lifted the canvas on the easel, and what was revealed was another painting, the nameless maiden. This? You took it out of the art gallery? No, this is not the second, the nameless maiden painted by Mr. Yuri in the manor. It's the first one that Miss Anna auctioned at the auction. Impossible, it was obviously destroyed by Yuri. Well, I picked it up later and then repaired a little. Luaccio stretched out his hand and wiped the painting slowly. He looked at Anna's eyes. In the process of repairing, I found something very interesting. I was talking about the paint just now. When the color on the painting slowly melted and turned into a mass of stains, it seemed to be washed by something. The nameless woman had already disappeared. There was only another woman on it, with a smile. Her eyes were moving, and her smile was charming. Yuri, Anna's left hand, overlapped her right hand, and her trembling hands gently folded on her lips, looking at its original appearance with infatuation. When a tear rolled down her cheek, she said softly in a choked voice, Don't worry about me. Thank you for loving me. In the black and white, a little bit of color slowly spread out. It was not bright, and the range was not big, just a little bit. But it was enough to fascinate Boss Luo, who quietly appreciated it. The soul light ball slowly floated out from Anna's forehead, like a floating dandelion, and finally fell on Luacio's palm. Its brilliance was restrained little by little. "It's higher than the standard," Miss Maid, who was waiting silently, said softly with a smile beside her master. "Congratulations, master." Luacio seemed to be in a good mood. With a smile, he picked up the painting from the painter and looked at it carefully. After going back, "Find a place to hang it up?" "Okay," Miss Maid replied softly, and then said, "It's a pity that Yuri has erased all his memories, and he hasn't had time to give a name." "Name?" Luaccio gave a start, and then chuckled. "Hasn't it been named long ago? Look, who is it painting?" So the painting was named. Chapter 303. Police Station. Yelgo was taking a nap. Of course, it was not because he had no work at hand and was too idle. He stayed up late last night to write a report. He didn't have time to go home to wash and change clothes, so he went to work wearing yesterday's clothes. Suddenly, the door of the office was opened. Yelgo was shocked and quickly stood up straight. "Mr. Victor, I'm not slacking off." I'm not Mr. Victor." Yelgo was stunned. He turned around and saw a policewoman in civilian work. He suddenly opened his mouth awkwardly. The policewoman snickered. "Well, Mr. Victor is in the coffee shop downstairs. He asked you to go there. He seems to be receiving someone. Look at his serious face." "Well, but his face is not very friendly." "Guest." Yelgo was stunned. Then he walked out with doubts. He quickly ran down the stairs and found the coffee shop. In the corner, Yelgo saw Victor's back. When he walked over, he saw the receptionist that the policewoman mentioned. He had a typical Oriental face, black hair, and was wearing a black coat. He was in his 30s. The man's eyes made Yelgo feel a strange pressure. At this time, Victor also turned around and said to Yelgo, "Don't stand there, sit down. Let me introduce. This is Mr. Yi Yin from Lyon, France. He has something to ask you. You just need to answer him honestly." Speaking of Lyon, France, Yelgo suddenly realized something. He looked at Victor and Yi Yin in amazement. "Mr. Victor, do you remember that Italian drug dealer was arrested in Moscow 2 years ago?" Victor smiled and said, "That was a joint operation, and that's how I got to know this guy." "Oh." Yelgo sat down cautiously. Although they were different systems, they were essentially doing the same thing. So Yelgo quickly adjusted his mentality. "What do you want to ask me, Mr. Yi? Then I'll get straight to the point." Yi Yin smiled. Of course, he didn't know how to speak Russian. They could only talk in English. He was indeed Yi Yin, the Yi Yin who had rushed to Moscow from France in one night. Just because of a message from Victor, he had made such a move. "I want to know about the corpse," Yi Yin said seriously. "Mr. Yelgo, please describe the whole thing to me." "Listen, Mr. Yelgo, it's very important for me, and even more important for our headquarters. I hope you can be thorough." Yelgo subconsciously glanced at Victor. Although Interpol sounded like a very prestigious profession, they actually didn't have the authority to directly request information from other police systems. But Victor gave him a look of acquiescence. Yelgo hesitated and nodded. "Well, Mr. Yi, you can ask me. That person, why did he become like this?" Yelgo recalled. "I remember that at that time, he seemed to take out a syringe from his body and then inserted it into his neck." Yi Yan's eyes suddenly brightened. "Are you sure? Did he really inject it?" "Yes." Yelgo nodded. His body began to swell. "I'm sure of it." Yi Yan nodded and let out a sigh of relief. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Finally, I found some clues about those guys." Yelgo. Anyway, Yelgo was confused. Yi Yin repeated the same question and the same scene more than 10 times before he finally left, seemingly satisfied with what he had asked. He said that he had other things to do. Only Yelgo and Victor were left. Yelgo couldn't help but hesitate. "Mr. Victor, well, isn't it a bit if we reveal this matter privately?" "It's not a private disclosure," Victor calmly said. "There are a lot of things involved in this matter, and I can't explain it clearly in a short time. But you'll get to know it in the future." Victor suddenly took out a ticket from his suit. "This is the ticket to France tomorrow, and your transfer letter." Mr. Victor, I don't quite understand. The French side has been replenishing their manpower recently. About a month ago, when I contacted Yi Yin, he asked me if I had any good guys to recommend. Of course, I just said it casually, but I recommended you. Mr. Victor. Listen, Victor said indifferently. Don't follow me. There's no future for following me, because I don't know how to go in the future. I may not be able to go on, but I may be able to go on forever. But no matter what, it's always good for you to go out and gain experience. Of course, you can refuse. I'm not forcing you to do anything. But if you choose to stay, I'll apply to transfer you to the evidence room. That was a civilian job. It was a disguised emotion. Can I think about it? I think I need some time to digest it. Don't take too long. Yakov returned home after a busy day. He directly sat on the sofa, calling his wife's name, but there was no response. He couldn't help but look around in confusion. When he looked back, Yakov suddenly jumped up in horror. Who are you? Mr. Curator of the art gallery, you framed me for stealing the painting. Have you forgotten who I am? Black leather coat. It should be a woman, but wearing a black clown mask, he couldn't see her face. Yakov frowned. Are you a Rael F and C? He was vigilant while quietly retreating. If I were you, the best choice now is not to move. Otherwise, I don't know what's in the room now. Oh, I'm talking about what will happen to your wife and your children. What do you want to do? Yakov was stunned and said in shock and anger. Where is the real, the nameless maiden? The nameless maiden? Hasn't it been sent back to the art gallery? Yakov said in cold sweat. After reopening today, I also went to have a look. Under the clown mask, Vera sneered, but I used some special equipment to scan it. You know your kind of paint? If you use light, there will be some changes. It took me 2 whole days to test the intensity of the light. I don't know what you're talking about. Yakov turned his head. Really? Vera continued to sneer. Do you want me to go to the art gallery to take a picture of the so-called, the nameless maiden? I think something interesting is going to happen. Oh, yes. I also found some interesting things in your house, like the documents about the use of funds for the art gallery's repair. Yakov took a deep breath. Let's talk about it. You just want the real painting, but I can tell you, it's not in my hands. It's FM who blackmailed me. I had to do this. After the painting was made, I gave it to him directly. So, I don't know where the painting is now. Although I also suspect that the one in the art gallery may be fake, I can only pretend that I don't know. Vera suddenly walked to Yakov and said with a harsh voice modified by a voice changer, Mr. Curator, I don't have a good reputation, so I can't imagine what I will do. I really don't know. Really? Your so-called real painting. But why is it that after I got it, it's just a made-in-China painting? I don't know what you're talking about. Vera didn't want to continue talking, directly pressing him on the table, taking out a small knife and nailing it on the table, next to the curator's face. I'll talk. Don't kill me. I'll talk. Yakov was shocked at this time and quickly said, The painting is still with me. I know FM is a guy who doesn't know anything about art, and he wouldn't think that I'd dare to switch the painting before giving it to him. I'm just trying my best. I really owe too much gambling debt, so I can only try my best. This family is supported by my income. I'm not interested in your family affairs. Where is the painting? The study? Behind a bookshelf in the study. Vera caught him into the study and asked Yakov to open the bookshelf. Sure enough, there was a painting wrapped in oil paper. After Vera's threat, Yakov could only tear the oil paper and take out the thing inside. But when the painting was unfolded, Yakov showed a strange expression. How could this be? How could this be? He smashed the picture frame. In front of Vera. Vera was surprised by this guy's action. Was he going to destroy the evidence? But he was willing to do this to the real, the nameless maiden. But soon, Vera finally knew why Yakov showed such a desperate expression. On the back of the so-called real, the nameless maiden, he switched back. There was also made in China. How could this be? Where's my painting? Where's my painting? Where's my painting? Who stole my painting? Yakov frantically rummaged through the cupboards and chests in the study like a madman. Vera looked for a while. Judging from this guy's appearance, it seemed that he was also fooled. Then where was the real painting? I have no clue at all. Miss Vera helplessly left through the window and just saw Yakov's wife and children driving back. She sneered subconsciously, You don't even know that your family is at the party today, and you still have the nerve to say that it's for your family. Alas. At this time, Vera's phone rang. Boss Vera, I found out the identity of the wolf you saved in the manor. He's called Yelgo, a little detective in Moscow. But I found that he seems to have bought a ticket to France tomorrow. France? Vera was stunned, and then suddenly smiled. Vicar, thank you for your hard work during this time. Let's go to France for a vacation. Are you sure it's for a vacation? I heard that the male models in France are very good. Is the flight at 3 o'clock in the afternoon okay? There was a knock on the door. It was in front of the office of the deputy chief editor of the most gossipy magazine in the city. Hearing the knock, Ren Xiling quickly raised her head from the pillow and wiped her saliva. When she saw Lizzie coming in, she rolled her eyes. It's you? I thought it was the old, dirty chief editor. Lizzie came in with difficulty. Why was it difficult? It was like a mass grave, and it was full of the smell of all kinds of instant noodles. Looking at the messy desk, Lizzie couldn't help but sigh. Sister Ren, why do I feel that your life has fallen into hell when Luo Chio is not here these few weeks? You work overtime every day and sleep here instead of going home? Ren Xiling yawned. There are 5 days' worth of clothes in my home that haven't been washed. Do you want to help me wash them? No need. Lizzie quickly pinched her nose and waved her hand. Ren Xiling gave Lizzie the third finger and then stretched herself. What's the matter? Say it. Nothing, go. I'll go back to sleep. Tell me in advance when the boss comes. Sister Ren, you have a parcel. Parcel? Yes. Lizzie nodded. It seems to be a painting. It's an international express delivery from Moscow. It should be a letter from Luachio. F*CK. Why does he send me a painting? I can't eat it. Then, I'll throw it away. I'll throw you away first. Ren Xiling opened the parcel and found that it was an oil painting. Sub-editor Run, who was drinking coffee to refresh herself, twisted her neck. She felt uncomfortable because she didn't sleep at home these days. She was energetic every day after sleeping at home. Sure enough, the bed at home was the best way to replenish her vitality. Ren Xiling looked at the oil painting for a while, but couldn't figure out anything. After wrinkling her nose, she put the oil painting under the wall of the office. The Nameless Maiden? What a strange name. But thinking about it, it was probably just like that. But when she looked at her office, which was like a garbage hill, she felt that even if there was an oil painting here, it wouldn't improve much. Chapter 304. Morse? Yuri? Tipika didn't like to be called by the name Yuri. Generally, he would ask others to call him Mr. Morse. Especially after these days, he felt that he had a weird dream. In the dream, he was wronged and inexplicably stayed in the detention room of the police station. But the reality was that he had been secretly planning with a guy named Brubov to deal with FM. In fact, the plan was finally completed. Brubov, congratulations. You will soon become the new Duma. The lower house needs an excellent person like you. It was not in Tipika's manor, but in a private room of a restaurant in the city. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Morse. Brubov was calmer than Morse had imagined. In this banquet, he could even be described as reticent. Moreover, Brubov didn't drink, which seemed to be very rare for a Russian man. Brubov looked at Morse at this time, saying indifferently, the appointment should come in the next 2 months. At that time, I will put forward the shipping modification plan in the parliament and strive for more preferential treatment for your company. Ha ha. Brubov, I like your pragmatic character. Morse narrowed his eyes and said happily, but work is work. You still need to relax when it's time to relax. I've arranged some good girls for Mr. Brubov in the evening. If there's nothing else, I'll go back to the company first. Unexpectedly, Brubov suddenly stood up, looking at Morse, and said, just keep in touch. Morse's face didn't change, showing a rather regretful expression. In that case, I'm looking forward to having dinner with Mr. Brubov next time. Brubov just nodded, and then tidied up his clothes as tidy as when he came, and then left with the bodyguards. Tut! This Brubov reminds me of the Germanic people. Morse took a sip of red wine, instead of an authentic Russian. Sir, Brubov is of authentic Russian origin. This should be right. The old butler reminded in time. Morse shrugged and said, I mean the feeling. I hate this kind of inflexible guy. Morse suddenly thought of something and said in a low voice, Go and arrange a few people to work in Brubov's company. I don't like what Brubov says. I take it for granted. Understood. Boss, are you really going to keep working with the Typica family? In the car, the secretary who was sitting upright suddenly asked. Brubov, who was resting with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. He looked out of the window and suddenly asked, Where is this? The secretary had no choice but to say, We're almost at Tverskaya Street. Stop, I want to get out and walk, said Brubov softly. The secretary had no choice but to ask the chauffeur in front to find a place to park on the street. After getting off the car, Brubov suddenly said, Just wait for me here. I want to walk alone. Boss, it's too dangerous. The secretary frowned and said. Tverskaya Street was filled with a large number of shops, restaurants, and hotels. It was a place where tourists and locals liked to spend money. There was too much turnover, so naturally there would be a lot of pickpockets. As a secretary, he was not worried about his boss's safety. Have you forgotten what I did before? Brubov patted the secretary's shoulder and said indifferently, Just wait for me here. The secretary had no choice. Of course, he knew what his boss did before he entered the business world. He was a soldier. If the club occupied a real shop in the commercial street of Luachio City and existed in the same place with this shop in a different phase, then the club should have its own place before it came to Luachio City. A spice shop. Yes, this is the address of the club before it moved. Boss Luo carefully looked at this shop that sold spices from different parts of the world. Well, mainly from Europe. In any case, he didn't believe that the former boss, who had never stepped out of a room, would deliberately choose such a place to do business. So, it was probably chosen by Miss Servant Girl. Luachio looked at Yi curiously. Miss Servant Girl just blinked her eyes, tilting her head and asking, Master, what's the matter? Was she acting cute? Miss Servant Girl of the club, it was rare for her to do business here. Nothing. Luachio just buried the appearance of Miss Servant Girl in his heart and didn't want to say more. He was more willing to admire quietly and smiled. It's rare for you to come back. Let's buy some spices, but he suddenly stopped talking. With a trace of strange movement, Luachio moved his sight. That was the feeling of the black card, and the black card reflected the mood of the holder. It wasn't too strong, but vaguely, there was a feeling of wanting to meet. Yi also seemed to have sensed what Boss Luo sensed. She stopped her steps and cast an inquiring look. Build a place for negotiation. Luachio slowly ordered. Miss Servant Girl nodded, and her deep blue pupils like the sea slightly brightened. Looking at Yuye's eyes, Luachio couldn't help but recall the first and only day when he came to the club as a guest. She was still so charming. Gradually, Brubov found that something was wrong. The pedestrians around seemed to be decreasing all the time. It was a bit strange. It wasn't that he walked to a place with fewer people, but that people disappeared one by one in front of him. But the street was still the same. Around them, some gray fog began to emerge from the ground. Brubov subconsciously put his hand on his chest. In the inner pocket of the suit, against his chest, there was a secret that he didn't intend to tell others in his life. He subconsciously sped up his pace and finally came to a small shop that sold spices. It was this store. Every once in a while, he would subconsciously pass by this store and then stand there quietly for a while. Many times, he didn't gain anything, but this time he saw something different. Everything in the shop seemed to be still, as if he had entered the narrow space of time. He didn't see the shop owner, nor did he see any more customers except a man and a woman. The man was now looking at the goods on a display cabinet with his back to him. As for the girl, Yuyi Miss. Long time no see. Brubov took a deep breath and looked up. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, but still stepped into the shop. Long time no see indeed, Mr. Brubov. Miss Servant Girl greeted him with a smile. Brubov said seriously, Since that time, I passed by here many times, but the club has moved away from here for a while. Yuyi still said with a professional smile, But if the desire of a customer is strong enough, it is completely possible to come to our shop. Mr. Brubov, you probably just hesitate around here. Every time? Brubov said with a wry smile, 20 years ago, I used up my love and got enough money. Until now, I'm still single." He shook his head. "Over the years, although there are many excellent women around me, none of them can move my heart. I think my hesitation is not without reason." "I see." Yui nodded and didn't speak. She quietly turned around and looked at the back of her master. Brubov took a deep breath and said seriously, "Long time no see, shop owner. But I think we haven't officially met. Mr. Brubov, right?" Chapter 305. Hearing this voice, Brubov was stunned. This voice was completely different from the club owner's voice in his memory. It seemed that this was a much younger voice. "Mr. Brubov, this is our new owner." Only Miss Maid answered Brubov's doubts in a soft voice. Brubov couldn't help but move his lips. This club seemed to have never stopped giving him surprises since the moment he first met it. At this time, Luaccio took down a bottle of citronella powder from the display shelf. Looking at the label without turning around, "Mr. Brubov said that you have passed by this place many times. What's the matter?" Brubov glanced at the servant girl, who looked exactly the same as 20 years ago. She didn't look old at all. Suddenly, he said, "Nothing. I just occasionally remember to chat with the former shopkeeper." "Consulting?" Luaccio asked again. "Almost." Brubov nodded. It was hard to tell whether he was being sarcastic or sincere. "Your shop give me the best discount in terms of consultation, although I'm not the same person as the former owner." Luaccio put the bottle back to its original place and took down another bottle. "However, the content of the work is not different. Mr. Brubov, you don't have to be so formal." Brubov was silent for a while, and then suddenly said, "I want to know if you need to do something which is completely against your original intention, but is an indispensable step before you reach your goal. If it's you, will you choose to take a detour, or do you have to take this step?" Luaccio said indifferently, "Why do you need to assume it's me? Mr. Brubov, do you think it's valuable to assume it's me?" Brubov gave a start. He suddenly felt that he did ask a very stupid question. He made a deal with this club and got a huge amount of money, so he was always in awe of the club's mysterious means. If the club owner wanted to do something with mysterious power, he probably didn't need to worry about anything. "No." Brubov shook his head and suddenly mocked himself. "Worthless. I did ask a rather stupid question. Do you think I can change this country?" All of a sudden, Luaccio heard Brubov's question. However, Luaccio acted as if he didn't hear him. He put down the bottle in his hand and then took out the third bottle to look at the label. Brubov didn't care about it at this time, but with a trace of doubt, as if he was just talking to himself. "After I got the money, I made all kinds of investments. After so many years, I did have much more wealth than before. But 20 years have already passed." Brubov smiled bitterly. "It took me half of my life to accumulate capital, but for me, it is far from enough. I have to continue to climb up. It's a place where we still can't see the end of. Sometimes I even wonder if I can succeed, if I can accomplish what I want to accomplish." It was still Brubov's voice. He sighed, "I don't know if I can go on." He finally stopped talking, but he didn't get a response from the club's new boss for a long time. The new boss seemed to have found something suitable after selecting the third bottle of spices. He put it in a shopping basket carried by Miss Maid. Then he walked to another display case. Brubov was stunned. He felt that he was being ignored. This made him feel a little irritated. However, with the passage of time, this feeling gradually began to subside. Even this subdued fast was beyond his expectation. "Do you feel better?" Luaccio unscrewed a bottle of ginger powder, lowered his head, and sniffed, suddenly asking. Brubov moved his lips. He pondered for a while, and then nodded subconsciously. Luaccio then whispered, "I've read a book before, but forgot who wrote it. It mentioned that if the consulted person doesn't want to give too many suggestions mixed with his own views, then it's enough for the consulted person to listen." He put the ginger powder in Yuye's basket and suddenly said, "Mr. Brubov, since you chose to use your lifelong love as the transaction fee, it shows that you really need the money. You need to use it to do something you want to do. Therefore, I thought that I should know whether to take this step or not. After all, you've made up your mind at the beginning. So, Do you need to trouble yourself for this step? No. Brabov shook his head gently, as if he was relieved. It's not necessary. I think I just want a listener. Thank you for listening to me. It's nothing, Luaccio said indifferently. After all, this is a kind of after-sales service. I'll come again if I have chance. Brubov took a deep breath, and his expression suddenly became quite serious. He nodded towards Luaccio's back. After that, Brubov walked to Yu Yi and said with a smile, Miss Yu Yi, you're still as beautiful as before. In order to show my respect, well, I have a small villa on the lakeside of Lake Ladoga in St. Petersburg. If you don't mind, you're welcome to have a vacation there at any time. It belongs to you. Then, goodbye. Brubov seemed to feel a little more relaxed and left the shop at a leisurely pace. Brubov used to be a soldier and participated in the Chechen War. It seems that his hometown was destroyed in this war, and all his family members died. He suddenly said, "And individuals can't shake the will of a country. A soul is not enough to directly change the path of a country." Luaccio shrugged. It seems that it's difficult to make a deal with Mr. Brubov again. But Luaccio stared at Miss, made in a daze. Suddenly, he remembered that the servant girl had once said, well, occasionally I will come across some enthusiastic guests who give me some small gifts. So, that's why you're a rich woman or a super rich woman, right? A small gift of a lakeside villa. Master? Miss May couldn't guess Boss Luo's thoughts at this moment. Luaccio smiled, patting her shopping basket. That's all I want. You can choose whatever you want. He then snapped his fingers. The moment he snapped his fingers, the surroundings returned to normal. There was still a lot of traffic outside. When paying the bill, Luaccio suddenly said, let's go to St. Petersburg next. The lakeside villa should be good for a vacation. There's still some time left before we go back. Don't waste it. Okay, I'll arrange the route right away. Boss, you're back. Seeing Brubov coming back from the street, the secretary couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was really worried that the boss would have some trouble. After all, the boss was the soul of the company. This company had an unimaginable future. Brubov just nodded and got on the car. After sitting down, he said directly, go back to the company. We'll be busy for a long time. By the way, show me the list of the aids you mentioned last time. Also, regarding the modification of the shipping plan, we should start working on it. Although the appointment hasn't been officially announced, I need to make all the preparations in advance. Well, help me make an appointment with Mr. Mayor in the evening and see if he's free to have dinner. The secretary was stunned and quickly nodded. She felt that her boss was suddenly full of energy after a trip alone. He was simply planning to fill his schedule completely and use one day as 2 days. Got it, boss. At the airport, Yelgo carried a luggage bag and a big backpack, running in the crowd awkwardly. Finally, he successfully completed the boarding procedures and found his seat under the guidance of the stewardess. He finally sat down. Yelgo slightly breathed a sigh of relief with a little bit of nervousness and excitement. He knew that he would soon set foot on another more intense and exciting life. However, he had to worry about something. That was his strange illness. Since his childhood, Yelgo realized that he would mutate when he was too angry. Therefore, he tried his best not to expose it. God knew what would happen if someone saw it. A werewolf who caused social unrest? He occasionally wondered if there were any of his kind in the world, and what he should do if he really met one. One of the main reasons for becoming a policeman was that he could see a lot of information that ordinary people couldn't see through the powerful police system. But obviously, even after becoming a detective, he didn't find anything useful these years. Hopefully, he could get in touch with some more secret things in the international organization in France. For example, the strange scene that happened in the manor. But I don't know where that Interpol Yi went. Yelgo said to himself, I think that Interpol Yi is right next to you. Suddenly, a voice came from the seat next to him, speaking the Russian official language, which was not very fluent and even awkward. Really? Right next to me. Yelgo nodded. Right next to me. Yi, Mr. Yi. You, why are you here? Yin put down the newspaper in his hand and stretched out his hand. The man in his 30s showed a charming smile. Hello, I'm Yin. I can tell you in advance that I will be your partner from now on. Partner? Mr. Victor, your friend's eyes are so scary. Vera, are you ready? We're going to the airport. Victor's voice came from outside the room. Right away, Vera, who was wearing a handsome suit and was about to comb her hair into Leonardo's look, the younger version, in the mirror, answered casually. What she didn't notice was that the black card, which she had casually thrown out like a flying card, hit the wall and fell on the edge of the wall. Suddenly, it floated up and flew into her suitcase in an instant. She finally combed her hair, then packed her suitcase and dragged it out. Yen. Chapter 306. Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. It was under the cliff of brown, black, and red soil, but it was not built against the mountain, but directly sunk into the mountain. But it was big enough to be clear even from a distance. The white outer wall seemed to be telling something, and the simple and almost shabby style seemed to show its position. It was the Pechiers Monastery. It had been 3 days since Anatole had returned to the monastery with Sullivan. In the past 3 days, Anatole didn't see Sullivan again. He seemed to have entered the depths of the monastery, which was a place that even he, a student who graduated here, hadn't entered so far. Forbidden Area, Holy Land. Such names had been spread among the students when he was still a student here. Although most of these were just guesses among the students, the old monk of the monastery didn't seem to have a formal explanation. So after so many years, there was such a legend. Only those who are favored by the Lord can enter. Anatole was an orphan and abandoned near the monastery. Later, he was picked up by an old monk. It could be said that he grew up here. At that time, it seemed to be the time when the sun appeared, so the old monk named him Anatole. That was the meaning of sunrise. Life in the monastery was very simple, so simple that it was as if they had returned to a primitive society. He grew up here, was baptized, and then officially became a monk. Finally, he got the recognition of the dean with the best performance in his class. Only 20 years had passed. He was a genius in others' eyes, but he knew that he just worked harder than others. Anatole, are you there? When the door was knocked, Anatole was praying. Basically, when there was nothing else, he would always pray. This made him feel that he could empty his mind, which also made him feel that he could really listen to the gospel of the Lord one day earlier. The dean said, "Please go to the number 13 auditorium." That forbidden area? Anatole met Mr. Sullivan. Of course, there was also the dean who personally blessed him when he graduated, and the old monk who picked him up from the wilderness and raised him. "Anatole, my boy, come here." The old friar who had adopted him now smiled and beckoned. Anatole walked up to them. He began to size up this auditorium number 13. He found that this place seemed to be even more ancient and constantly emitted a kind of holy aura, which calmed his heart, even surpassed the effect of praying. But in fact, this 13th auditorium didn't look like an auditorium at all. To be precise, this was actually just a stone room with candlesticks hanging on the 4 walls. The center of the auditorium was actually a circular platform. At this time, Sullivan was at the center of the round platform, waiting for his arrival. The dean and the old friar stood on either side of Sully. When Anatole arrived in front of the 3, the old cultivator suddenly stretched out his hand and whispered, "Anatole, my child, kneel down." Anatole nodded. Without much hesitation, he knelt on the ground. The old cultivator continued, "Close your eyes, then pray in your heart and listen." Anatole slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, the dean and the old cultivator also slowly retreated to the edge of the round platform. They also lowered their heads and closed their eyes at the same time, because for them, even if they opened their eyes, it would be blasphemy to see what was going to happen next. On the round platform, there was suddenly a faint white light, and Sullivan also walked to the front of Anatole. His hands spread apart, and his body slowly left the ground. He was floating. In the 13th auditorium, suddenly, a strong brilliance burst out from Sullivan's body. In an instant, there seemed to be countless white feathers scattered over the auditorium. A pair of white, soft feathers of light slowly spread out behind Sully. Finally, Sully opened his eyes. It was a pale golden pupil. Almost at the same time, a golden light beam shot out from a ball in the center of the auditorium and directly shone on Anatole's body, making him seem to be bathed in a golden ocean. Warm and compassionate, Anatole was almost lost in this feeling that soaked into his soul and gradually forgot the passage of time. At this moment, he seemed to feel a wave of anger, as well as a will that he couldn't quite describe. At this moment, the warm and compassionate feeling disappeared in an instant. He seemed to be suffering from heavy shackles. Instinctively, Anatole opened his eyes. He knew that there was something wrong with his memory. The reason why Sullivan and the dean were so serious was that they wanted to help him solve this problem. But it seemed that even if he returned to the monastery and even came to the 13th auditorium, he still didn't remember the so-called forgotten things. Mr. Sullivan? Anatole was very calm and looked at the person in front of him with doubts. The strange scene around him had disappeared long ago. At this moment, Sullivan just closed his eyes and stood in the same place. His face was a little pale. When the dean and the old cultivator heard Anatole's voice, they opened their eyes in surprise at the same time. Then, Sullivan said something that shocked everyone. "Anatole, you are a heretic. You need to wash away the sins in your body." Dean, imprison the holy power in his body. 3 days later, I will personally purify his soul that is stained with the aura of sin. Anatole moved his lips. Obviously, his heart, which had been calm for 20 years, began to fluctuate violently at this moment. He didn't understand. And what happened to the recovery of memory? A long time ago, there was a kind but ugly monster in the forest. On the train to St. Petersburg, a young mother was telling a story to a troublesome little girl. Later, the monster met a little girl. The little girl was not afraid of it. Instead, because of the monster's kindness, she and the monster became good friends. Every day, the monster would pick the sweetest fruit from the forest and fill it with clear spring water for the little girl to eat. However, the little girl had to promise not to tell others. The little girl in his arms was slowly drawn in by the story. The mother continued. Many days passed, and the little girl was very happy with the company of the monster. Suddenly, one day, the little girl innocently said that when she was 18 years old, she would marry the monster. The little girl later moved away with her family. She didn't have time to tell the monster about it. The monster didn't know, but it still picked the best fruit and filled it with the sweetest spring water. However, it didn't see the little girl again. The little girl in her arms showed a sad expression when she heard this. The mother patted her face comfortingly, but continued to whisper. It counted the days day by day. It carved a mark with its nails on the tree stump that it had made with the little girl. After a day, it carved a stroke. In this way, day by day. Suddenly, one day, the monster found that it was the little girl's 18th birthday. But on this day, it still didn't see the little girl. Hearing this, the little girl pouted and said, "Mom, this monster is so pitiful. Will it never see that little girl again?" Her mother said gently. Later, it saw her. This monster finally mustered his courage and walked out of the forest. It mixed in the crowd and searched all the way. Finally, it found this little girl. Of course, when the little girl was 18 years old, she had already become a very beautiful girl. Then, did Mr. Monster and the little girl get married? The mother was about to speak and respond to the child's expectations. Unexpectedly, at this moment, her father, who was sitting beside her, suddenly said, "They're not married." The little girl fell in love with someone else. So in the monster's anger, it ate the little girl in one bite. Then, it became a very handsome person and found another true love all of a sudden. As he spoke, her father opened his hands and approached his daughter with bared fangs and brandished claws. "After eating you, I'll become a handsome person too." Wah! Ah! This scared the little girl out of her mother's arms. However, she soon seemed to have bumped into something and lost her balance. She was about to fall to the ground. Be careful. In fact, she didn't fall. Instead, she was steadily supported up. The little girl raised her head and tilted it. What she saw was a young, big brother who looked like her parents. Black hair and black eyes were not common for little girls. "I'm sorry, sir." Seeing this, her mother quickly stood up from her seat and said apologetically, "My husband was playing with this child. I didn't expect to scare her like this. I'm really sorry to have bumped into you." As she spoke, her mother glared at her husband with a reproachful gaze. "It's okay." The young big brother smiled. He touched the little girl's head and suddenly said, "Madam, the ending your husband said is quite interesting." Ah, the little girl's father was stunned. He couldn't find how to continue the words of this young man with an Asian face. He could only smile awkwardly. "By the way, is this story original?" The young big brother suddenly asked curiously. The little girl's father quickly waved his hand and said, "Not really. Anyway, it's a story I heard from the old man when I was young. That ending was just nonsense. Don't take it seriously." "Is that so? I won't disturb you." Looking at the young big brother walking back, the little girl climbed onto her father's lap and stuck her head out from the seat. When she saw the big brother sitting 5 or 6 rows behind her, she pouted and suddenly looked down at her mother and said, "Mom, there's a very beautiful big sister there." Okay, we're about to reach the station. Sit properly. We're about to reach your grandmother's house," the mother said sternly. At the same time, she twisted her husband's ear and forced him to look back. The train finally stopped. Chapter 307. In the evening, Luocio stood on the wooden balcony and watched the sunlight fading away by the lakeside. The villa was built above the lake with a larger area than usual. The cool water vapor began to climb up slowly when the night turned cold. Yu was standing on the edge of the balcony. She was diligently fishing something from the bottom of the lake. It was beer in a basket that had sunk into the lake. An entire afternoon of immersion should be enough for the beer to have a very good taste. Although it was a lakeside, it was not a cluster of buildings. There were all kinds of villas in the rich area, but it was just a lonely one. It had nothing to do with luxury. It was just a simple 3-story building. Inside was naturally filled with modern tools. But from the outside, it looked like a building from 100 or 200 years ago. It was a bit big for 2 people to live here. But Luocio felt that the quietness was just right. When they arrived, there was only an old man in the villa who seemed to be waiting for something. He handed over the keys without saying a word or asking any questions. In the end, he drove away in an old but well-maintained pickup truck. The food was all fresh. The original plan was to end the trip in less than a week. But Luocio felt that it was okay to spend the time here, in this small cabin in the woods surrounded by the woods and the lakeside. The servant girl had pried open the lid of the beer bottle. The beer rose in the glass slowly. Everything in front of them was golden. Luocio snapped his fingers. In the living room behind him, the phonograph automatically loaded a black film disc. When the music slowly sounded, he looked at Yu and said softly, "Do you want to dance? I want to see you dance." When the night fell, the lights were slightly bright, but the dancing shadows were elongated. It was even quieter here. The off-road vehicle for a road trip was driving along the road by the lake. There were 4 young people and 2 couples in the car. They were kissing passionately in the back seat, and they were chatting casually in the front seat. The 2 people in the front seat seemed to have just become a couple not long ago. Perhaps because the boy was too shy, his eyes would occasionally glance at what was in the back seat through the rearview mirror. Then, when the girl in the front passenger seat wasn't paying attention, he would quietly rest his eyes on her legs or chest. They came out for a vacation. The 2 in the back seat caught his attention. "I hope I can succeed," the boy secretly encouraged himself. Suddenly, the girl in the front seat said, "Did we go to the wrong place?" The boy in the car really cared about his new girlfriend. He didn't have a girlfriend before. This was the first time in his life, so he cared about every word of his girlfriend. The car came to a stop at once. The deserted road gave him the freedom to stop whenever he wanted. He quickly opened the GPS map on his phone and raised his head. "It seems we really went to the wrong place. Should we go back?" The girl in the back seat muttered, "I'm hungry. This place seems to be okay. Isn't there a small forest nearby?" The other boy in the back seat didn't care. "In our life, we occasionally need to have some unexpected things." The girl in the front seat sighed. "I hope we won't spend the night in this car. And are you sure you have the ability to find food in this place?" The boy in the back seat said casually, "I'm good at catching fish." The girl in the front seat just rolled her eyes. At this time, the girl in the back seat stuck her head out and suddenly turned back. "There seems to be a house over there. I saw the light. Maybe we don't need to sleep in the car. The boy in the driver's seat quickly put down the brake, saying quickly, I'll drive over there and have a look. Excuse me, is anyone here? The off-road vehicle stopped in front of the hut beside the lake. The boy in the car, Len, shouted loudly after getting off the car. But after a while, there seemed to be no response. He couldn't help but shout politely, Excuse me, is anyone here? The one behind Len was Branham, who was relatively careless. At this time, Branham patted Len's shoulder with both hands. Buddy, you should shout like me. He even whispered, I think Allie would prefer to see your capable and straightforward side. So, Branham directly walked up the wooden stairs in front of the hut and knocked on the door with great force in a hurry. Bang, 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 bang. Finally, Branham's palm hit nothing. He took a step back and saw the door slowly open. At this moment, Branham subconsciously stared at it and made a clear and weak whistle. It was a very beautiful woman who opened the door. Her deep blue pupils were as charming as sapphires. Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with? The woman smiled and said softly. Branham suddenly felt that he couldn't find out what to say next. He thought he might be immersed in this almost suffocating beauty. But he seemed to remember that he had a girlfriend and reacted quickly. We went the wrong way. There are no other buildings around. Can we stay here for a while? It's better if we have food. Saying this, he quickly took out his wallet from his pocket. Of course, we'll pay. Please wait a moment. The woman nodded slightly and walked into the hut, but closed the door. Branham looked at this scene in astonishment. He had to turn around to look at his companion, and then shrugged. Allie raised her head and looked at the hut. The old architectural style, the surrounding woods, and the lakeside seemed to bring her back to the era of 100 years ago. She suddenly felt the coolness of the night, holding her hands and rubbing them lightly. She glanced at Len, who was looking down at the map on his mobile phone. She thought with distress, maybe it would be better if this guy could be more active. Branham's girlfriend suddenly walked to Allie, patting her back, and suddenly said, Isn't Len good? An honest man. Gloria, sometimes when I'm too honest, I feel a little. Allie stopped. She seemed to have difficulty finding the words to describe what she was going to say next. She couldn't help but sigh and put down her hands. Forget it, you won't understand. Gloria was about to say something, but suddenly the door was opened again. The unbelievably beautiful woman appeared in front of the four people again. Her smile was like a solidified sculpture, as if it didn't change at all. She said, You can come in. Our master said if you need, you can stay here for one night. I'm Branham. This is Len. Allie. This is Gloria. Luaccio. This is Yi. She works in my house. But Branham clearly remembered that this woman called you. Yi just said the word master after entering the hut. He found that it was far more complicated than it looked from the outside. The renovation of this place must have cost a lot of money. Furthermore, it was beside a lake. It should be very difficult to get a piece of land here. This young man looked like a typical Asian. His Russian was so good that he couldn't distinguish which country he came from. But no matter which country he came from, at least he was a very rich person. Sorry to bother you, Mr. Luaccio, Len said cautiously. Luaccio was not a very hospitable person, but now, because of the need of work, he was more willing to communicate with outsiders. Two couples, taking advantage of the weekend holiday, drove to the suburbs for a vacation. It sounded like a very good way of life, right? Young people were always talkative. At the dinner table, Luochio was listening to the passionate conversation between the two couples. They started from a few words to a lively one. China. Branham finally found out which country the owner of the hut came from, and couldn't help sighing, I feel that this is a country full of mystery. I like this mysterious place. Luochio cut off a piece of potato and put it into his mouth, chewing it for a while, then said softly, Branham seems to like mysterious things very much. I'm bold. Branham smiled and put his hands on the table. I like thrilling things and scary things. For example, he suddenly paused and looked around. He seemed to become cautious all of a sudden. He lowered his voice and said, For example, look at how quiet this place is. We're strangers who just met each other. If suddenly there's a knock on the door, wouldn't that be great? His girlfriend, Gloria, subconsciously touched the goosebumps on her arms and said reproachfully, "Shut up. Don't you know how to look at the atmosphere?" Branham shrugged. "I said for example. I just said for example. Besides, how could someone knock at this time?" At this time, cluck, cluck, cluck. Someone knocked on the door. Chapter 308. Along the way, they didn't see any other light sources except for the lakeside cottage. In such a remote place, what was the probability of encountering two groups of people going the wrong way in less than half an hour? They almost subconsciously looked towards the owner of the cottage. They found that the young Oriental man who called himself Luaccio also showed a curious look on his face. That was to say, for this Luaccio, he was also surprised by the sudden knock on the door. Branham, Lynn, and the others couldn't help but look at each other. This was completely a subconscious behavior, but they seemed to see a little bit of tension in their companion's eyes. "I'll go and have a look," Yi said softly. Luaccio nodded. Watching Yi leave, he took a glass of water and drank. "It seems to be very lively tonight. Except that this man came from China, there seemed to be no more information. At the same time, it seemed to have piqued the curiosity of the young people, especially since there were only two of them, one master and one servant, and they looked so weak, yet they lived in such a remote place." Gloria couldn't help but ask curiously, "Luaccio, you and Yi live here? Aren't you afraid? Oh my God, it's too quiet here. Maybe there will be beasts." "It's okay. The scenery is good during the day," Luaccio replied. Lynn didn't want to become a person who could only listen in this conversation, so he quickly said, "Mr. Luaccio, what do you do for a living? It's not easy to own such a small lakeside cottage." Lynn couldn't help but receive the gaze of his three companions, including Allie, who just became his girlfriend. He couldn't help regretting. It seemed impolite to suddenly ask an unfamiliar person about his work. "Oh, sorry, I asked too much." Lynn quickly waved his hand. "It's okay." Luaccio smiled and drank a mouthful of water. "Me? I'm just doing a small business. I sell some small things to others." Is Missy not back yet? Could something have happened?" Ellie suddenly looked towards the door. "I don't think so," Luaccio said softly. "Let's eat. The food is getting cold." At this time, Miss Maid came back alone. She lowered her head and whispered something to Luaccio. Boss Luo nodded with a smile. Then Miss Maid turned around and left. When she opened the door, she saw a man wearing a black top hat. He was very clean, had a very gentle face, and his body was very slender. He looked like a male model on the runway. The man looked like he was in his 20s, less than 30 years old. Polite and courteous. That's right, he was also carrying a rather old-looking leather case. The case was so big that it completely covered his back. When he saw Miss Maid open the door, he suddenly took off his hat and put on his chest. Then he nodded slightly. "I didn't expect to meet such a beautiful lady here." "Thank you." I smelled the aroma of food from far away. The man smiled. "Forgive me for being too hungry, so I was attracted to this place. I don't think there's any place nearby." Seeing the beautiful lady's smile growing, the man also smiled elegantly. "Of course, I'll pay for it. Please wait for a moment." The man took off the box on his back and placed it in the corner. Then he turned around and looked at the table full of people and dishes. He suddenly took a light breath and revealed an intoxicated expression. What a fragrant smell. This man was so handsome that even Allie and Gloria seemed to be dazed by him. At this time, Branham suddenly pushed Lynn, who didn't react and was stunned. Then Branham pushed his body quietly. Lynn then realized and patted the stool beside him. Branham said exaggeratedly, "Sit here if you don't mind. Of course, we're not the owner here. Like you, we're just passing by and are helped by the owner here." "Like an angel," the handsome man said with a smile. "What?" Branham gave a start. The man still smiled. "Isn't it? In this remote place, there's a place that can provide food and a comfortable environment for people who are lost. The owner here really has an angel's heart." Saying this, the man raised the glass of beer from the table. He also stretched out his other arm, opened it, and then folded it in front of his chest. He bent his waist. "Why don't you salute our kind owner?" Boss Luo slightly opened his mouth. It was indeed a bit exaggerated. Luaccio gently shook his head. Ha ha ha, you guy. Branham was amused by the man's appearance. Sir, did you come here from the Tsar's era? He followed the man's example and picked up a glass. He raised his hand and folded it in front of his chest. He bent over slightly and drank all the beer in the glass in one gulp. He wiped his mouth and said, "This reminds me of the role of the minister who met the king in a play when I was in junior high." Len always felt that Branham was looking for trouble. At this time, he had to touch his best friend with his elbow and smiled awkwardly. He may have drunk too much. The handsome man shook his head and chuckled. "It doesn't matter. As this gentleman said, maybe I'm really a person who lived in the Tsar's era." "Then you have to tell us what was in the Tsar's era," Gloria asked with great interest. The handsome man closed his eyes and slowly said with a magnetic voice, "There were sports cars that could run on the road." "Oh, I'm talking about carriages. There were also huts by the lake like here." "Oh, yes, of course. There were also our passionate and beautiful Russian girls, such as..." As if he was dancing, like a dancer, he almost spun himself around to face Gloria. He gently lifted her hand and kissed the back of her hand. "Like you, my lady." Even Boss Luo, who was watching the show, couldn't help but glance at Branham, who didn't look good. Well, he felt that there was a bit of vivid light flashing on his head. Green light. Branham was obviously a young man who couldn't bear this kind of behavior. At this time, his eyes changed. He became expressionless and said indifferently, "Are there people like me? I think I may be a warrior." The handsome man stood up and nodded in greeting. "I think so." "Oh, yes, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Eric's. I think I should sit down and enjoy this unexpected dinner." He whispered to the real owner here, the young man with an oriental face, "May I sit down?" Luaccio nodded. After Eric sat down, he picked up a plate of stewed potatoes and put it in front of his nose. After smelling it, he said with a smile, "This may be the most delicious thing I've eaten recently. I'm so grateful." Eric's was about to start eating, but at this moment, there was another knock on the door, and this time, the knocking seemed to be incomparably urgent, as the knocking did not stop. "Is anyone there? Please help me. Is anyone there? Please help me." It was a woman's voice. It seemed to be crying, and it was very loud. Even if they sat here, they could still hear it clearly. Chapter 309. The little girl held her mother's arm in fear, and her mother also held the little girl's hand more tightly. Luaccio had met the mother and daughter on the train to St. Petersburg. They were a family with a story. But now, the master of the family was missing. It was late at night, and the wind was strong outside. It was even colder near the lake, but the light in the house and the soft sofa seemed to give the mother some warmth. She was surprised to meet the young man on the train in this place, but the disappearance of her husband completely covered this subtle surprise. "We were going to go through this mountain road to my husband's hometown. He wanted to get off the train to relieve himself, so he asked us to stay in the car, but he didn't come back after half an hour. I had to get off the train to find him, but..." The girl's mother painfully covered her face, sobbing. "I only found his phone on the ground." "Did you call the police?" Ryan, one of the young men, was the first to speak after listening to the story. The girl's mother shook her head, taking out her phone. "I don't know why, but it keeps showing that the server is out of service. I have to ask for help." The young people looked at each other. Allie took out her phone, saying in shock, "I can't get the signal either." "Me too." Gloria also looked down at her phone. "Me too." "Me too." Seeing Ryan and the other three looking at him at the same time, Luoccio threw out his phone and shook his head. "I think mine is the same." "Isn't this place in the server?" Ryan was stunned. "But before I came in, I could still use the internet." "When did that happen?" "Now it's not the time to think about the signal, but how to help this lady." Allie suddenly bit her thumb. "By the way, Mr. Luoccio, do you have any other communication tools? I mean a wired phone." "Sorry, no." Luoccio suddenly stood up. "It looks like we can only wait for the communication to be restored naturally, or wait until dawn. If the communication still can't be restored, we can go out and ask the police for help. Of course, it would be best if this missing gentleman didn't meet with any accident and was able to find this place by himself. We have so many people. Can we go out and help to look for her?" Len suddenly raised his hand and said enthusiastically. But when he saw Branham's eyes, he lowered his voice. I'm just suggesting. For the girl's mother, perhaps any kind of help was what she desperately needed. At this moment, she was even looking at the crowd with a pleading gaze. At this time, Gloria subconsciously looked at the night outside the living room and reached out to touch her arm. She hesitated and said, "Are there really no more places to live nearby?" The girl's mother's eyes immediately dimmed. Thinking about it, it was possible that they would encounter danger, let alone in a situation where someone was missing. She knew she couldn't force anything. "Mrs. Maggie, do you still remember where your husband went missing?" Suddenly, a voice came from the dining table behind them. "Alex, I remember." Alex wiped his lips with a napkin on the table, then stood up and smiled. "If you don't mind, I can accompany you back to the original place to look for him. I can also help." Len took a deep breath at this time, slowly raising his hand and saying, as if he had plucked up his courage. Vaguely, Allie's eyes seemed to brighten up. Hearing Len's words, Branham frowned and suddenly stood up. "Well, I'll go with you. It's better to have one more person than one less. But Gloria and Allie will stay here for the time being, right?" It seemed to be decided in this way. The girl's mother, namely Mrs. Maggie, Alex, Branham, and Len, went back to the place where her husband went missing again. Although Mrs. Maggie was a little worried, she still chose to leave her daughter in the cottage. Perhaps it was because she had met this young man once on the train, or she felt that for the little girl, now she needed a safe place more. When Mrs. Maggie made this decision, it seemed that she had made a great decision. "Well, I hope that the goddess of luck can bring us good luck on this trip." In front of the door, Alex smiled and said goodbye, then finally got into the car that Mrs. Maggie drove back. The little girl was caught by Allie's palm. She looked at her mother's car reluctantly until it was out of sight. Then she suddenly threw herself into her elder sister's arms. After Allie comforted her, she took the little girl into the house. Gloria was now walking back and forth in the living room, seeming to be worried. Allie didn't know what to say for a while. She subconsciously looked at the young owner of the cottage, finding that he was now reading an old book, which was taken down from the bookshelf on the wall of the living room. It seemed that he was not worried at all. This person was really calm. Allie thought quietly. After an unknown period of time, the servant girl walked into the living room with a tea tray in her hands. She squatted down and took out the cup inside. She said softly, "Drink some flower tea. This is Luotian flower tea. It can calm your mood and help you recover your spirit." You put the cups in front of them one by one. Allie said thank you. Gloria had never stopped pacing back and forth since the beginning. At this time, even if she took the cup, she just held it in her hand, drinking while walking back and forth. It seemed that she was thinking about something and was absorbed in it. "Tell me, what's your name?" Miss Maid came to the little girl at last. "Lena." "Lena, good girl." Miss Maid touched the little girl's hair. "Are you afraid?" Lena nodded, suddenly asking, "Elder sister, will my father be okay?" "I don't know," Yi said softly, "but if he is okay, he will naturally be okay. If something happens, no matter how worried you are, something will still happen. Do you like to have something happen? Or not?" The little girl was stunned, tilting her head. She couldn't understand the words of this beautiful elder sister. The little girl, Lena, lowered her head and drank the tea, then looked around curiously. "This elder sister is so strange." Lena suddenly whispered in Yuye's ear. She was pointing at Gloria. "Is there anything strange?" Yuye asked curiously. Lena suddenly said 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Did you see this elder sister turn around after 3 steps, then turned around again after 3 steps? She's been like this since just now. Really? Miss Maid smiled slightly. She stood up, finally touching Lena's head, then walked to Luocio and sat down. She just sat there quietly, without any sound and other unnecessary movements. Allie looked at her curiously. She felt like she was looking at a puppet. Tick-tock, tick-tock. That was the sound of the pendulum clock in the living room, as if it was beating with a heartbeat. Every movement could be transmitted to people's hearts. Gloria sat down. Perhaps she was tired from walking. She looked down at her phone and then at Ellie. She seemed to be trying to find a topic to talk about. She opened her mouth several times, but in the end, she didn't say a word. The little girl, Lena, looked back and forth in the living room. It was already time for her to go to bed. Now it seemed that after experiencing something, her normal schedule was disrupted. Lena, who was wearing a small floral skirt, white stockings, and red leather shoes, walked down from the sofa gently. She saw a large leather suitcase placed in the corner of the living room and the dining room. Lena walked towards the suitcase subconsciously. It was getting closer and closer. She stretched out her hand, wanting to touch the suitcase. It was getting closer. Pa! Suddenly, Lena heard such a sound. She was startled and even turned around. She only heard that the elder brother who was sitting and reading suddenly closed the book in his hand. That was why the sound was made. The elder brother whispered to her, "Touching other people's things is not what a good child should do." Lena stuck out her tongue and quickly put her hands behind her back. Luaccio smiled. He grabbed a candy for the snack box on the tea table. "Do you want to eat it?" Lena nodded, walking quickly towards Boss Luo. Chapter 3:10. Milk and strawberry candy seemed to suit Lena's taste. "Delta, big brother, can you tell me a story?" Lena suddenly asked. "Story?" The little girl nodded. "Every night at this time, my mother would tell me a story to coax me to sleep." Luaccio suddenly remembered that the little monsters he met in Yang Taizi's Taoist Hall seemed to have been asked to tell stories like this. He subconsciously had a strange thought. Is it because I'm a kind of naughty kid who would tell stories to me? What story do you want to hear? Lena thought for a while. "Big brother, do you know the ending of the story?" "It's the story my mother told me on the train in the daytime." Luaccio said, "Didn't your father tell you the ending of the story?" "Lena doesn't believe in my father's ending." The little girl raised her head and pouted. "I want to hear the real ending." "Then what do you think the real ending should be?" Luaccio suddenly asked back. The little girl lowered her head and thought for a while. "Well, Mr. Monster is so pitiful. He should marry a little girl and live happily ever after." "What monster?" Allie suddenly interrupted. Perhaps because she was too quiet, she needed something to talk about and say something. "It said that he's a very kind but ugly monster." Luaccio looked at Allie, slowly telling the first part of the story he heard from Mrs. Maggie in the morning. "Oh, that's the story." Allie showed a look of understanding. She saw the little girl's gaze, so she smiled. "I also heard this story when I was a child. Well, it's actually a popular story in the nearby area." Lena suddenly turned from Boss Luo to Allie. Allie touched her head, but at the end of the story, Mr. Monster and the little girl didn't get married, but lived happily together. Why? Lena was disappointed. Did Mr. Monster really eat his bride? Wait, why did the story suddenly jump to the bride stage? Luochio looked at this little girl in surprise. "How far have you gone with your imagination?" "No," Allie said seriously. "On the contrary, the little girl ate Mr. Monster's heart." "Why did she eat Mr. Monster's heart?" The little girl, Lena, showed a sad expression. Allie said calmly. Later in the story, the little girl grew up and left Mr. Monster. She went to the outside world, met a lot of people, and learned a lot of things. Then, she fell in love with the son of a noble. However, when the little girl grew up, she was actually not beautiful, and the son of the noble did not like her. Later, she met a wizard. The wizard told her that as long as she ate Mr. Monster's heart, she could immediately become very beautiful and make everyone fall in love with her. Allie sighed and said, "Mr. Monster was very sad when he found out, but it still dug out its heart. It was because it liked this little girl very much. Even though the little girl had grown up and no longer liked it, it was still willing to let her be happy. So Mr. Monster dug out his heart and gave it to her. Then he left alone. Then, did she really marry a noble's son in the end? No." Allie shook her head and said, "After eating Mr. Monster's heart, she did not become more beautiful. Instead, she became as ugly as Mr. Monster. The noble's son disliked her even more. Even her parents despised her. In the end, she could only go back to the forest and live there, not daring to see people. But this time, Mr. Monster was no longer with her." Lena said sadly, "Mr. Monster, is he dead?" "I don't know. The story ends here." But later on, there was a legend that after Mr. Monster dug out his own heart and took it out, he wandered outside alone. Allie said slowly, "People said that without a heart, the monster had no memories. It was only a shell like a walking dead. but it wanted to find its heart. Thus, it went around attacking innocent little girls, wanting to find the heart that it had lost. But it ate a lot of little girls, but in the end, it still could not find it. In the end, Mr. Monster came to the side of a lake and jumped into the lake. Since then, he has never appeared again. Mr. Monster is so pitiful, Lena said sadly. Allie could only reach out and touch Lena's face, comforting her in a soft voice. Is this a local legend? Luaccio asked suddenly. Allie nodded and smiled bitterly. I don't know what kind of mentality the person who made up this story had. Anyway, when I grew up, I always felt that this story should not be told to children. But you still told the whole story, didn't you? Boss Luo shook his head and looked out of the window, whispering, That lake, it's here, Latigo Lake. The three of them opened the windows respectively, shining the strong flashlight on the trees on both sides of the road, and kept shouting the name of Maggie's husband. But it seemed that they got nothing along the way. Logically speaking, since this place is so remote, it should be at least 20 to 30 kilometers away before there are people. Could it be that they encountered a large beast or something? Branham suddenly put forward his hypothesis. Len couldn't help bumping this guy. Mrs. Maggie, don't worry, this is not a dangerous area where brown bears come out. Even if there are beasts, I think there are more squirrels. Len hurried to comfort her. It's here. Our car was parked here just now. Maggie stopped the car at this time. Then let's get off the car and look around carefully to see if we can find anything. Eric suggested. Mrs. Maggie nodded and then pointed to a direction. My husband's mobile phone was found in front of us. Then they walked towards this direction and walked into the forest. Their shoes stepped on the dry branches and leaves, which sounded unusually loud. I suddenly feel something. Walking behind them, Branham lowered his voice and whispered to Len, Later we will meet Mrs. Maggie's husband's dead body. Len gave a start and hurriedly said, Don't talk nonsense. Branham smiled. Don't you feel it's very exciting? When we found the dead body, he suddenly shouted, Wow, and stood up. Then he chased after you and kept chasing after you. What's wrong? I'm just saying, why are you so scared? You're so timid. Why did you sleep with Allie? Branham, are we lost? Len swallowed his saliva and shone the flashlight in front. Chapter 3:11. Mrs. Maggie. Eric's. Mrs. Maggie. Len tried to call Mrs. Maggie and Eric's loudly. However, after a long time, other than the mist rising from the forest under the flashlight, he did not see anything that moved. What should we do? Branham. He couldn't help but look at his companion in panic, and even grasped his companion's arm at a loss. Calm down. Don't scare yourself. Branham took a deep breath and said, We should think about where we lost them. No, we should go to the parking place. They may find that we are missing, so they are waiting for us. Len could only nod. They started at once for the head. At this time, Len seemed to step on a pit by accident and suddenly screamed in pain. Perhaps because he was too nervous, Branham scolded with a little dissatisfaction. Be careful, you idiot. Help me. Len stretched out his hand in the small pit. Branham stretched out his hand, but when he shone the flashlight, he couldn't help being stunned. His body trembled subconsciously. Len, what are you pressing on? Don't scare me. Len was stunned. He instinctively put his hand under his body. It was warm and soft, but he didn't know the feeling of soil. Len's eyes became extremely panicked. It's Mom, Mrs. Maggie. Ryan crawled to his feet and screamed in horror. Branham subconsciously moved the flashlight in his hand when the light moved to Mrs. Maggie's head. Mrs. Maggie was also looking at him. Is she breathing? Branham swallowed his saliva subconsciously. Len, who was calm, obviously couldn't keep calm. His trembling fingers slowly reached to Mrs. Maggie's nostrils. No. Yi covered the little girl Lena with a thin blanket. It was midnight. The time for the little girl Lena to sleep had passed. She might have missed her usual routine because she was worried, but her body was obviously protesting if she missed too much time. So she was so sleepy that she fell asleep on the sofa. I'm going to clean up the tableware. Seeing that there was nothing more to do, the servant girl walked to Luaccio and said, There are not many plates, so I don't plan to leave them until tomorrow. Luaccio nodded. After Yi cleaned up the tableware and went into the kitchen, Luaccio suddenly looked at the pendulum clock on the wall and then at Ailey. She sat on one end of the sofa and rested her chin on her hand, but she was dozing off. There was no internet connection, and in this silent environment, it was easy to get sleepy, especially when there was still the worry of waiting. Probably. Ellie's head suddenly slid down from her palm, as if she had just woken up. She began to look around, but all she could see was Gloria, who was lying on the other side of the sofa. Gloria seemed to be completely asleep. She couldn't help but ask, "Is he not here yet?" Luaccio shook his head. "If Miss Ailey is sleepy, you can rest in your room. There were actually quite a lot of houses here. Maybe it's better for you to take a bath." Hearing the sound of washing from the kitchen, Allie didn't ask where Yi was. She shook her head and said, "Let's talk about it later. Let Lynn and Branham haven't come yet." "Okay." Luaccio suddenly stood up and walked to little Lena's side. The little girl turned her body in her sleep, and the blanket almost slid down. Boss Luo covered the blanket again and suddenly asked, "Is Lynn Branham a good friend of Miss Ailey?" Allie scratched her head, yawned, and took a deep breath. Then she pulled herself together and said, "Ryan is my boyfriend. We just started dating not long ago. Branham and Gloria have been together for a long time." Seeing Allie looking at the other end of the sofa, Boss Luo also looked over and nodded. "Miss Ailey and Miss Gloria have known each other for a long time. We were classmates in high school. Then we went to the same university." Allie smiled slightly. "She's always a lively person. I'm very happy to meet her. Miss Ailey is also good." Boss Luo praised her politely. A.I. Lee's eyes suddenly darkened. Her mouth curved into a smile, but she didn't say anything. She didn't seem to want to continue this topic, so she asked, "By the way, Luaccio, why did you build such a villa in such a place?" There was no one around, but looking at the decorations in the small villa, it was obviously worth a lot. "A guest gave it to me." Luaccio then said, "I have nothing to do these days, so I decided to stay here for a while. And for me, this quietness is just right." He sat down again and said indifferently, "Sometimes work is tiring, so it's a good way to recharge 1 or 2 days of leisure. Then we're disturbing you." Allie smiled. "Don't worry about it." Luaccio shook his head. "I'm the kind of person who likes to stir up trouble. There will always be some strange things happening to me. For example, Mr. Monster in the story just now. If he suddenly emerged from the lake, I won't be too surprised." Ailey suddenly rubbed her arms as if she had goosebumps. She subconsciously looked at the dark lake on the terrace through the window of the living room. "Hearing you say that, I feel the same way. You sound like you're telling the truth." Luaccio looked at Allie like this. Allie also looked at Boss Luo like this. They suddenly looked at each other and smiled, and the atmosphere seemed to become more lively all of a sudden. Feeling that the topic seemed to be open, Allie looked around the living room again. "But your guest is really generous. Although it's quiet here, but this villa is really good. I'm a little curious, what kind of business do you do and why the guest is willing to give you such a gift?" "What kind of business?" Luaccio thought for a while. "Probably selling some things to the guest. You know, when people ask for something, if they really want to get it, they will be very generous." Allie gave a start. Selling some things to the guest was too general. It was almost like nothing was said. She frowned and said, "What do you need?" Luaccio smiled and said softly, "Miss Allie, why don't you think about it first? What do you need?" "Me?" Allie shrugged. "I think it's best if Len and others can come right now." But at this moment, she heard a loud knock on the door. She was stunned at first, and then said with surprise, "They should be here. Luaccio, you're really amazing. I just opened my mouth and they came. I'll open the door." Luaccio also stood up. Allie quickly walked to the door and opened it. At the moment when the door was opened, Allie saw Lynn and Branham. The two hurried in, but their faces were unusually pale, and they looked very flustered. Lynn's lips even looked a little dry, and seemed to have fallen on the ground and stained with some mud. Allie was stunned at once. "What's wrong with you?" Branham was gasping at this time, and while adjusting his breath, he said quickly, "Corpse. We found a corpse. It's the corpse of Mrs. Maggie." "What?" Ellie suddenly exclaimed in surprise. She subconsciously turned around and found that the owner of the small villa had come over curiously and seemed to have heard her exclamation. Did something happen? Allie quickly said, Just now Branham said he found Mrs. Maggie's corpse. She had to lower her voice. Mrs. Maggie's corpse. Len looked at Allie at this time and said in a panic, It's true. I accidentally fell into the pit and then found Mrs. Maggie's corpse. Before that, we lost her, didn't expect. How could this happen? Allie said inconceivably. But right, isn't there another person, Eric's? Branham quickly said, Don't talk about that guy. We can't see him at all. He glanced at Len, and his expression suddenly became serious. We suspect that it may be this guy. Don't talk nonsense before there is evidence. Allie suddenly interrupted. Branham said, But think about it. This Eric's suddenly appeared. Don't you think it's weird? You see, his behavior is just like a psychopath. How could someone carry such a big box to this place? Think about it seriously. We didn't see this guy carry any means of transportation, but he walked here alone. Allie was shaken at once. Box? Len swallowed his saliva at this time and said hesitantly, I say, Allie Branham, do you feel the size of this box? What do you want to say? Branham asked nervously. Len swallowed his saliva again. Is the size just right? I mean, if an adult is stuffed in it, it seems it's okay. That box. Branham frowned. At this time, Allie suddenly heard a scream. It was Gloria's voice. Did Gloria wake up because she heard the commotion? But Allie didn't have the mood to care about when she woke up. She quickly walked into the living room and saw Gloria curling her body on the sofa in horror. She stretched out her trembling finger and pointed at the big leather box leaning against the corner. Blood, a lot of blood. Yes, sticky blood was gushing out of the cracks in the box at this moment. The blood flowed on the floor and soon spread out in a large area, but it didn't stop. To be continued. Chapter 312. College meant more freedom. Although for high school students, the degree of freedom was already very high. However, they could leave the sight of their parents and choose to live in the academy's dormitory with some of their peers. They wouldn't have to listen to their parents nagging if they returned home late. Furthermore, they would have more time to choose to work, and they would have more economic freedom. Who wouldn't want that? I should be happier, Ailey thought. She sat on the grass next to the school playground, reading Tagore's book while thinking so, but she didn't seem to feel the so-called good half a semester had passed. Suddenly, something patted on the top of her head. Allie turned around subconsciously. She found it was Gloria. This girl, the girl who lived in the same place as her, and had been in the same class since high school. You're here. Gloria sat down directly, looking at Allie, and said, People in the club asked me why you were absent again. Allie, if you don't like it, why did you join in the first place? Allie said angrily, Do you think I really like to join this so-called club? Eating lettuce? Oh, my God, what kind of weird brain circuitry does one have to think of such a weird thing? In fact, I don't even know why eating lettuce can be popular on campus. And it's a college campus. Is your life so boring that you have to eat lettuce? I don't like it either. Gloria shrugged. Allie was stunned. Weren't you the one who dragged me in? Gloria played with her curly hair. Allie knew that she had just curled her wavy hair. And as a victim, she had waited for 5 hours at the hairdresser. Because I saw some boys in this club are good, so I joined, Gloria said with interest. Besides, don't you feel that finding a boyfriend is what we should do at this stage? Allie snorted. Yes, our parents worked hard to send us here just to let us fall in love. Gloria lay down and said, I just feel that youth without love is too boring. Besides, it's not like I'm not learning. You don't spend all your time in the classroom, library, and dormitory, okay? Allie said unhappily. I'm not you, Miss Gloria. You can attend an all-night party and still get an A in the exam. But if I don't prepare well before the exam, I can only get a B. You're too tense. Gloria patted the grass beside her and said, Learn from me. Stop and stretch. You will feel that this world is actually very good. Allie shook her head and said, I just know that if my grades can't keep up, the scholarship for next semester may be gone. As she spoke, she hurriedly tidied up the things on the ground and stood up. I'm going to the library now. Do you want to come? Gloria waved her hand. The moment Ellie turned around, she seemed to have bumped into someone. The Tagore in her hand fell to the ground. Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I'm fine, my name is Ryan. This is Branham. Blood was still spreading. Such a weird situation could always hijack people's reaction for a while. Allie didn't react until a while later. Gloria, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly jumped up. She didn't even bother to put on her shoes and ran over. Allie saw Gloria holding Branham's arm at once and was scared to cry. What the hell happened? Oh, my God. It must be that weird guy. That's right. Branham took a deep breath. The body of Mrs. Maggie's husband must be in this box. God, did we meet a homicidal maniac? Let's go. I don't want to stay here. Branham, Gloria said quickly. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. The door was suddenly closed. It was so loud that Ellie instinctively turned to look at the door. What happened? Not only the door, but also the sliding door in the living room and the window in the dining room were all closed at the same time. Branham suddenly walked to the door and twisted the handle of the door, making a squeaking sound. But no matter how hard he tried, there was no way to open the door. Branham forcefully hit the door several times, but still couldn't break open the door of the hut. Branham suddenly turned his head. His eyes stared at the owner of the house, the young man from the east. What the hell is going on here? Why is the door suddenly closed? Luo Chio, who was being questioned, opened his mouth slightly. He frowned slightly and looked towards the door. Boss Luo suddenly walked to the door and put his hand on the handle, gently twisting it. Why is it like this? Branham still asked loudly. Luocchio then turned around. Why is the door locked? But can you keep your voice down? You'll wake up the little guy who finally fell asleep. He pointed at Lena, who was still sleeping on the sofa. At this time, shouldn't you wake her up? Branham snorted and then walked quickly to the sofa. Looking at the situation, Branham intended to wake up the little girl, but he suddenly stopped and stepped back step by step. Oh my God! As bold as he was, he seemed to have become the most timid coward at this moment. Looking along Branham's line of sight, Allie saw the big suitcase left by Erex. The big suitcase had fallen into the pool of blood, and then the button on it suddenly opened by itself. It slowly opened a gap, and then just like that, it suddenly stopped moving. Suddenly, something suddenly stretched out from this pitch-black crack. An arm covered with blood. It had crawled out. Crawl, crawl, crawl. Len's face was pale, and his trembling lips couldn't say a complete sentence. After one arm, another arm appeared. It was a human arm, but what was inside it? It seemed that he or she couldn't completely crawl out from the suitcase, and could only crawl on the ground with both hands. The suitcase moved in the pool of blood, getting closer little by little. Ah! Gloria let out a scream and ran to the French door between the living room and the terrace. She pulled it crazily, but still couldn't open it. In a moment of desperation, Gloria suddenly ran to the stairs leading to the upper floor and ran up. Gloria! Branham shouted. At this moment, the suitcase suddenly rushed up. Allie was stunned and only felt that her arm was suddenly caught. When she reacted, she was dragged by Len and also ran up the stairs. Branham also ran up with him. Chapter 3:13. Branham was humorous and always exuded a masculine aura, which might come from his hormones as a football player. His family condition was also good, and he knew how to be romantic. He was a good boyfriend. First of all, how should Len describe it? Perhaps it was because there would be a dull feeling when they got along with each other. Allie, what's wrong? In the corner of the school canteen, Gloria, who sat next to Allie, patted her shoulder, which made Allie stunned. Gloria said, "What are you thinking about? We are asking you a question." Is it? Allie pretended to be calm. "I was thinking about a question assigned by the professor." "Sorry, I didn't hear it. What did you ask me?" Branham, who sat on the opposite side of the table, showed a charming smile. "We want to invite you two to the Halloween party this weekend. You know, we haven't found a female partner yet. Gloria has agreed, and you are the only one left." Me? Allie subconsciously wanted to refuse, but she didn't know why. When her eyes met with Branham's, she nodded subconsciously. When Gloria regretted her nod, Gloria said in surprise, "My God, You have to know that my Allie never attends parties. She thinks it's a waste of time. Branham smiled. That's a great honor. Right, Lynn? Oh, yes, yes. Seeing Branham and Lynn cleaned up the tableware and left first, Allie lowered her head and drank up the rest of the red cabbage soup. Was she looking forward to it? That's great. Allie, you are finally enlightened. Gloria put her palms together, with a surprised smile on her face. Should I really go? Allie suddenly hesitated. I have to hand the project design on Monday. Gloria held Allie's cheeks with both hands and said seriously, Allie, do you think an old professor's praise for you? Oh, you must believe me. He will not only praise you. So, do you think this is more important or the historical significance of your first party since you came to this school? But I suddenly remembered that I don't have the clothes for the party. Allie shook her head. I think I'd better not go. Is that a problem? Gloria patted Ellie's shoulder, blinked her eyes, and patted her chest. Don't worry, leave it to me. My Princess Ellie. Once in a while, they should enjoy the campus life, right? Allie thought silently. Should I enjoy my youth once in a while? Really? Did so many interesting things happen during your high school days? Looking at the words on VK's chat interface, Ellie started to feel that the time she spent in the library today was different from usual. I also want to know more about you. Interesting things about you. Can you tell me more? Looking at Branham's selfie profile picture on the interface, Allie couldn't help but sigh. It's good to take initiative. They seem to always be able to find a topic to talk about. Since when did it start? She and Branham seem to have more topics to talk about, probably since the last invitation. In the next few days. I'm really looking forward to the party tomorrow. Yes. I'm really looking forward to it. Allie lowered her head and looked at the open textbook in her hand. There will be dancing in the party, right? When the music sounded, the words were no longer words, but the opened pages were like a screen, showing some wonderful fantasies. Do you like me, Branham? Well, in fact, the party in the university seemed to be far different from the party in her imagination. Of course, it was not the kind of dance party with melodious music. The subwoofer seemed to be able to cause an earthquake. The young and crazy body was twisting, and the blurred and almost dizzying lights were dazzling. Originally, there were still a few people on the dance floor, but in an instant, Ellie was pushed somewhere by the people around her. Gloria was always so dazzling. Allie looked at her in the center of the dance floor, like a queen surrounded by people. Gloria is really beautiful. She didn't know when Lynn was the only one she knew. Allie glanced at Lynn and found that he was holding a bottle of beer in both hands. It seemed that he had been sitting here since the beginning. Why are you sitting here? Suddenly, Branham came out from the crowd, and his body was gently twisting with the rhythm. Branham clapped his hands and said loudly, "Come on, don't sit there." With this, Branham directly pulled Allie and Lynn's hands, pulling them to the dance floor. Although it was not the kind of party where people would dance, it seemed to be very good. Allie couldn't help thinking when she was twirling. She raised her head to look at Branham, and suddenly had a feeling of enjoyment. I'm going to relieve myself. You guys go ahead. Branham whispered to Allie, and then patted Lynn's shoulder. What did he say? Lynn couldn't help asking curiously. He said to relieve himself. So sorry, I'm not suitable for this occasion. I may not be as good as Branham at dancing. It doesn't matter, I seldom come here. Allie shrugged. Indeed, after Branham left, she always felt that staying with Lynn was unusually awkward. Your dress is so beautiful today. Really, thank you. Allie looked around. I'm a little tired. I'll go outside for a while. Allie. Lynn was suddenly pushed and bumped by people on the dance floor and became dizzy. Under the eaves outside, Branham and Gloria were kissing. That was a way of kissing that Allie had never experienced before. Allie quickly turned her back to them, although she felt that Branham and Gloria wouldn't notice her because they were hugging and kissing. She was so eager that she really hoped that they wouldn't notice her. It turned out that Gloria also liked Branham. Crack. The door was opened easily. Luaccio glanced at the lawn outside the house, but didn't see anything useful. He slightly answered, and then closed the door. Looking at the stairs leading upstairs, he slowly walked into the living room. The little girl Lena rubbed her eyes and woke up. Big brother, are my mom and dad back? Not yet. Luaccio shook his head and sat down beside Lena. Bang, 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 bang. At this moment, the sound of something crashing came from upstairs. It was too loud. Lena immediately grabbed the blanket covering herself. Looking up at the ceiling, Big brother, is there anything up there? Well, Luaccio thought for a while and suddenly smiled. There's a monster. Do you believe it? Little Lena gave a start and subconsciously opened her mouth. Is it Mr. Monster? Luaccio just touched her head and suddenly asked with interest, if it's Mr. Monster and you see him, but he wants to eat your heart, what will you do? The little girl seriously thought for a while and suddenly held her chest. Can I give you half? Luaccio was more curious. Why half? Lena opened her round eyes and said, because if Lena has no heart, I'll disappear like Mr. Monster, and then my mom and dad will be very sad. But if I keep half, they won't be sad. Then, what if Mr. Monster didn't dig out your heart? Luaccio whispered. Then what will it be? Luaccio also looked up at the ceiling and said indifferently, something that belongs to you. The little girl Lena tilted her neck, thinking carefully even though she didn't understand what the big brother was talking about. But at this time, a beam of light came in from outside. The little girl suddenly jumped down from the sofa, and she heard the sound of the car engine. It must be my mom and dad coming back. I'll open the door. The little girl excitedly ran to the gate of the villa and twisted the door lock. But it was not her mother, Mrs. Maggie, nor her father she saw. It was Eric's. Isn't this Miss Lena, the little princess of Mrs. Maggie? Eric's showed a surprised expression and took off his hat with a smile. He bowed in front of the little girl. I'm so honored that Miss Lena opened the door to welcome me in person. But it was obviously not her parents, so Lena was disappointed. Where's my mother? The little girl naturally remembered that her mother went out with this weird brother. Mrs. Maggie? Eric smiled. Don't worry, Princess Lena. I think you'll be able to see your mother soon. Of course, your father too. Really? The little girl showed a happy expression. Luaccio walked over slowly and said indifferently, have you found her? Of course. Eric squinted and smiled softly. Thanks to your luck, we'll find her soon. Luaccio said indifferently. I didn't do anything. Eric blinked his eyes. He put his palm gently on the edge of his ear, making an expression as if he was listening. Really? But I seem to have heard something interesting. With that, Eric stepped back and raised his head to take a look at them. By the way, Mr. Luaccio, can I come in now? Eric suddenly asked. By the way, I just told your noble servant girl that I'll pay the fee. Is it possible that Mr. Luaccio wants to collect the fee now? No. Luaccio shook his head and moved aside with a smile. Please come in, respected guest. Thank you. Bang, bang, bang. I want to leave here immediately. Gloria's face was pale with cold sweat. They had already hidden in the room on the top floor of the villa. Branham and Lynn were forcefully pushing against the door. But the door kept being knocked. Baby, listen to me. I also want to leave here immediately. But who can drive this damn thing away? Doesn't the owner of this house want to find a way? By the way, we've come up, but they're still downstairs. Are they? Lynn said in a panic. No choice. Let's jump down from here. Branham quickly suggested. We can't hold it anymore. Baby, Allie, you jump down first. No, it's too high. I can't do it. Gloria glanced at the distance from the ground and quickly shook her head. Bang! Branham and Lynn, who were blocking the door, fell to the ground at the same time, and the door had been broken open. It was still connected to the gigantic leather case. Within the crack, a pair of sinister and terrifying bloodshot eyes could be seen. Only a pair of outstretched arms could be seen grabbing onto the door frame. It appeared on the door frame like a spider. With a harsh scream, Allie and Gloria were scared and fell to the ground together. When Branham was about to get up from the ground, the thing on the door frame suddenly rushed over, together with a huge leather case, and fiercely pressed on Branham's body. Branham uttered a painful cry, but his hands successfully grasped the thing's arms, and they were in a stalemate. Seeing this, Lynn hurriedly grabbed the coat rack in the room and fiercely smashed it on the back of the thing, but it seemed to irritate the thing. Suddenly, from the crack of the leather case, a third arm stretched out again, an extremely thick and long arm. It grabbed Ryan's neck at once, and then choked him with all its might, lifting him up directly. Run, run, run. Next year squeezed out a voice with difficulty. Seeing this, Allie suddenly quivered and hurriedly stood up. She reached out to pull Gloria up and rushed along the edge of the wall to the door. The two rushed out of the door. Allie took a deep breath and resolutely closed the door of the room. But where should they go next? Downstairs. Although Branham couldn't break open the door, if it was a glass door from the living room to the balcony, it should be able to be broken open. Or the owner of the house had already done so, and now had left. Allie, we can't just leave Branham and the others like this, Gloria said nervously at this time. She put her ear on the door, listening to the sound inside the room, and swallowed her saliva. It seems there's no sound. Do you think Branham and Lynn have already given that thing to? Is it possible? Ellie immediately rejected the idea, but the sudden silence in the room made her hesitate. She waited quietly for a moment, but there was still no sound. Chapter 3:14. Finally, Ryan found Ellie in the middle of the crowded party. She was holding a small bottle of beer, leaning against the railing. No one knew how long she had been there. Ryan felt that he should be able to walk over at this time, but he hesitated for a moment and could only stop his footsteps, because from the other side, Gloria was walking quickly towards Ellie. Gloria was walking briskly, and the smile on her face was very beautiful. What would they say? But in this occasion, even if he tried to listen carefully, he couldn't hear anything. Gloria held Allie's hand intimately, so they should be talking about something happy. Allie. Gloria held Allie's hand intimately, and then held Allie's hand, leaning against the railing with Allie. What's the matter? You look very happy. Allie pretended to be ignorant and asked. I'm with Branham, just now. Gloria didn't stop smiling, blinking her eyes. It's really too sexy, Branham. Oh my God, my heart is still beating. Is that so? Congratulations. Ellie nodded. Gloria held Allie's hand with both hands, whispering, You will bless us. We're good friends. For a moment, Allie wanted to withdraw her hand from Gloria's. How many times had she done that? Like this, grabbing his hand and saying, We are good friends. When she was a child, when she shared the cookies made by her mother, she didn't taste much of it, but gave away most of it. Let's go shopping together. Oh, okay. There was still a lot of homework to be done. Oh, I used up this month's pocket money again, Allie. I have a little. You can return to me next month. She also wanted to buy something, but she had to wait until next month. Well, this dress is nice. I like it. Well, it suits you. Do you like it? Let me give it to you. Well, it's nice. I don't like this one, but I like your one. Well, I bless you. I also like it. Finally, Gloria saw Allie suddenly stop. She quickly grabbed Allie's arm. How is it? Have you thought of a way? She had always thought that Ellie was a very opinionated girl who knew what she wanted and was very courageous. After so many years, she was really glad to have a good friend like Ellie. Gloria saw Ellie nodding and suddenly looked at her seriously, asking, Gloria, do you really want Branham? Gloria nodded. Then, we have to confirm the situation inside first. Let's take a look. Just a glance. If there is any danger, we can only run. Do you understand? Gloria hesitated for a moment. What was going on behind the door? Although there was no sound, would it be possible that Branham and Lynn had been killed? However, she still desperately wanted to know if she just wanted to take a look. There was a light knock on the door of the room. Gloria and Allie leaned against the door at the same time, nervously looking at the situation in the room. All of a sudden, Gloria covered her mouth with her hand. She felt as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. In the room, that huge suitcase was swallowing Lynn's arm little by little. Branham just lay beside it, without any movement. Even if the arm was swallowed into the suitcase, Lynn still didn't move. One hand was not enough, so Gloria had to use her palm to cover her mouth. However, she felt as if she had just run a 400-meter sprint. Her breathing was so urgent that it seemed that if she did not close her mouth, it would not be enough to replenish the missing oxygen in her body. Gloria shivered all over, leaning against the wall beside the door. She felt that her legs were filled with hundreds of kilograms of mercury and couldn't move at all. What should I do? What should I do? Allie, I don't want to die. She grabbed Ellie's arm as if she was grasping at a life-saving straw. Her face was pale and her lips were trembling. I can't walk anymore. Ellie, you won't leave me behind, right? You won't leave me behind, right? We're good friends. Branham and Len are dead. Allie lowered her head at this time. Gloria couldn't see Allie's face clearly, but this horrible thing was mentioned again. She couldn't help crying. I know, I saw it. Don't say it. It's too horrible. Why do you encounter this kind of thing? Allie said faintly. Allie, what happened to you? It's all your fault. Gloria looked up with her eyes wide open, but her scattered bangs covered most of her eyes. It was an extremely ferocious look. Under such a look, Allie stretched out her hands quickly and easily pinched Gloria's neck. Too hard. He really used too much strength. Gloria felt that her neck was about to be broken. Panic and pain infinitely magnified her discomfort. For a moment, she could only look at Allie with pleading eyes, as if asking why. It's so good without you. If you didn't suggest it, it's so good. I should have studied quietly, I should have. It's all your fault. Gloria was in so much pain. This kind of fatal suffocation made her survival instinct explode a few times in an instant. She kicked Ellie in the stomach and loosened her grip on Ellie's neck. However, Ellie seemed to have gone mad as she pounced on her again. The two were entangled together, pinching each other's neck, but their bodies unconsciously knocked open the door of the room. Both of them fell on the floor at the same time. Gloria breathed crazily, and her eyes moved subconsciously. That huge box, the monstrous thing that had stretched out a few arms that now looked like a spider, was slowly crawling toward the two of them. Allie. Gloria crazily patted Allie's body, hoping that she could notice the approaching danger. But it seemed that there was no way to wake up Allie's madness at this moment. Gloria had no choice but to kick him away again with all her might. The moment the two bodies separated, Gloria desperately got up and rushed out of the door again. She was so scared that she had no choice but to close the door again. Gloria desperately pulled the door lock, only to hear the continuous roaring and screaming in the room. It was Allie's voice. She kept shouting, Gloria, Gloria, Gloria. Yes, she kept shouting her name sharply and crazily. Gloria covered her mouth with her hands. Tears from the shock had already covered her cheeks with irregular tear stains. It was not until the sound in the room stopped that Gloria suddenly shuddered. This time, she didn't dare to open the door again, but wanted to escape from this place like rolling and crawling. Finally, she got up and supported herself against the wall. When she reached the stairs, she slowly helped herself down. In the living room, the light was soft. The owner of the small villa, the maid who worked here, the strange traveler Erex, and the little girl Lena were sitting on the tea table in the living room. They looked at her walking down slowly. Get out of here. Gloria rushed down the stairs. Her footsteps were so chaotic that she almost missed the stairs. But she finally succeeded in coming down, running towards a crowd. Run away. Hurry up. Monster. There's a monster. Gloria pointed upstairs in horror. Go. Gloria hurriedly grabbed Luacio's arm, trying to pull him up from the chair. Luacio was pulled up by her, but asked curiously, Excuse me, who are you now? Gloria gave a start. Luacio said indifferently, Branham? Len? Gloria? Or Allie? What did you say? Gloria let go of Luacio's arm. I'm Gloria. I'm Gloria? No, I'm... She slowly raised her head, wondering, Who am I? Looking at this scene. Chapter 3:15. Allie stood uneasily in the tutor's office. It had been 10 minutes. The tutor didn't say a word. He just looked down at the pile of A4 paper in his hand. It was her completed course design, but she vaguely felt that the tutor would say something to her. As expected, the tutor adjusted his glasses. Well, Allie, I can see that you've worked very hard on this course design. You spent a lot of time on it, right? Yes, Professor. I've been preparing for 5 weeks. Allie answered quickly. 5 weeks? Well, it's a lot. The tutor nodded, but put down the paper in his hand. He looked at Allie with pity. But, since you have 5 weeks, why can't you give me the rigor in the last part? Do you know that it almost negates all your previous efforts? She couldn't say it out. It was something she started in a hurry after 4 o'clock in the morning. Because of her attitude, it even affected her own thinking. Even if it was her, when she looked back, she always felt that the last part of the story was simply pieced together randomly. You want to play last night, right? The tutor shook his head. You don't look good. Although you changed your clothes, the makeup on your face was off. Don't you know? There's also the obvious smell of alcohol on him. Professor, I just need to finish the last part. Can you give me some time? I can finish it tomorrow. Allie pleaded. The tutor shook his head. I'm sorry, Allie. I intended to send the outstanding work in this assignment to the competition. I'm also very happy to give you this opportunity. It's a pity that you've disappointed me. Professor, I've worked so hard for so long. Can't you give me another chance? Half a day. I only need half a day. The tutor still shook his head. I don't care why you don't have enough time, but the opportunity is equal. The other students have the same time as you. They didn't ask me to extend their time. Allie, I think you need to adjust your state. Go out. I have a class later and need to prepare something. Professor, wait. Ellie, striving is indeed a very good spirit. But before that, can you please reflect on yourself? If you felt that last night was important to you, why did you choose to play on a last night? The instructor sighed and stood up. Of course, I still have some expectations for you. However, I hope that my students are self-disciplined people. Seeing her tutor politely wave his hand and point at the door, Ellie could only lower her head, pick up the document on the table, and leave the room silently. She felt as if she had suddenly lost her center of gravity, walking alone in the school corridor. Ellie, Ellie, Ellie. Suddenly, someone patted her shoulder. Ellie looked up. It was him, Ryan. Ryan asked with concern, "What's wrong with you? Why is his complexion so bad? Also, have you ever rested?" I'm fine, but can you leave me alone for a while? Allie said calmly. But Ellie, Ryan wanted to say something. Allie said in a low voice, "What happened last night? Can we not talk about it? We're all adults. That's it." She must have been crazy last night to ask Ryan to send her away. Instead of returning to the dormitory immediately, they started to drink in the nearby park. When she woke up, they were already hugging each other. She felt a little uncomfortable in her lower body and naturally understood what happened after she got drunk. Seeing Allie leave, Ryan couldn't help but feel melancholy. Goodbye, dear. Gloria and Branham enthusiastically gave him an udkey, while Allie and Len were much calmer. Then, see you tomorrow. Well, see you tomorrow. She just nodded. Downstairs of the dormitory, after the two left, Gloria leaned on Allie's shoulder and suddenly said, I feel that you are too indifferent to Ryan. You don't look like a couple at all. It's been almost a month since the party last time. That day you suddenly told me that you were with Ryan. I thought you were finally enlightened. Not everyone can be as enthusiastic as you. Allie said indifferently, Len is not Branham. It's not like him to be too enthusiastic, right? Gloria didn't refute this point of view. You were right. It was just that. Ryan looked pitiful. Allie, my good friend, I want to tell you, if you are too indifferent to him, your hard-earned love will wither. Let's go upstairs. I want to take a bath. Allie wanted to change this topic, so she said directly, Oh, you go upstairs first. I forgot to buy something. Allie didn't care about it, dragging her tired body back to the dormitory. She sat down, thinking that her recent grades seemed to have dropped a lot. How could this happen? She scratched her hair, feeling agitated. But soon she took a deep breath to calm herself down and told herself that she couldn't go on like this. Study, Allie said silently, and quickly opened the textbook on the desk. But she always felt that something was missing. Notes? The notes I lent to Gloria yesterday. Allie shook her head, and while she was thinking that she was forgetful, she dialed Gloria's phone. What's wrong, dear? Where are the notes I lent to you yesterday? I need to use them. Oh, let me think. It seems to be in the first drawer on the left. Wait, I remember it wrong. It's not in the drawer, but in my school bag. Wait for me. I'll be back soon. Don't open it. I saw it. Notes. And? What did you see? Gloria's voice suddenly became nervous. The notice of being shortlisted for the last course design competition. Why didn't you tell me? Allie, listen to me. I didn't know that the teacher would put my work. I didn't know that there would be. Besides, it's just a shortlisted. It doesn't mean I will win the prize. Gloria's voice was full of annoyance. Do you think I won't be happy? Allie said with unusual ease. Silly. I'm happy that you can be shortlisted. Come back quickly. Really? Oh, Allie, I know you're my best friend. Wait, I'll buy some beer. Let's celebrate. Gloria seemed to be relieved. You don't know. I can't sleep well these days, and I was worried about how to tell you this. Now it's good. Wait for me. I'll be right back. Okay, dear. Beep. Allie hung up the phone with a smile, and then put the envelope back in the drawer. She was still smiling and sat back on her stool. Suddenly, she swept all the things on the table to the ground, and then screamed, and her hands were inserted into her hair like a flood breaking out. She cried, "Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?" She was very nervous, biting her fingers, and walked back and forth quickly. Under the scattered hair, her eyes were still wide open. Suddenly, she turned around and looked at Luaccio with her eyes wide open. I'm Gloria. Allie just wanted to kill me. Kill me. She suddenly approached Luaccio and grasped his arm. She pinched my neck. Look. She pulled open her collar, and there were clear finger marks on her neck. She really pinched me hard. Not only Luaccio, but also Erex and Yuyi, who was accompanying the little girl. Erex had come closer, as if he wanted to study it more carefully. Seeing Erex approaching, she suddenly stepped back in fright. She pointed at Erex and said in fright, "It's him. Murder. Murder." Lynn fell into the pit. When I wanted to pull him up, I found Mrs. Maggie's body. Only he and Mrs. Maggie suddenly disappeared. Then it must be him. It must be him. Are you Branham now? Luaccio suddenly asked. She was stunned and shook her head. No, I fell into the pit, and I found Mrs. Maggie's body. Branham wanted to pull me up. He also said I was an idiot. He was brave, but he was scared by me. Eric squinted. But didn't you say you were Gloria? 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 She suddenly screamed, putting her hands into her hair, and said in horror, Gloria? Gloria just wanted to kill me. She pinched my neck. Look, look. Didn't you just say Allie wanted to kill you? Allie. Allie. Yes, she wanted to kill me. She said stupidly. Suddenly, her expression became painful, and she said in horror, Go, go, Allie, go, Gloria, go. She waved her arms and suddenly shouted, Jump down. Let's jump down from here. Hurry. She suddenly shouted again, No, I'm scared. I can't jump. She suddenly screamed, Ah, it's coming. What's it? Suitcase. Big suitcase. Hand. Hand stretched out from inside. Monster. Eyes. I saw the eyes. Arm. 2 no 3. It had swallowed Lynn's arm. Isn't the suitcase still there? Miss. Suitcase. She subconsciously looked towards the dining room, putting down her hands that grabbed her hair, and said to herself, Why is it still here? Why is it still here? She stepped back step by step. Luaccio, Erex, Yuyi, and the little girl Lena were all looking at her. They suddenly grinned, and their eyes lost their white. They were like mummies. She saw. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Chapter 3:16. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she was frightened. Sometimes her eyes were dull. Sometimes her eyes were moving without focus. Sometimes, 32, she didn't know who she was, and sometimes she hoped she was. Finally, she stopped moving. She was like a statue as she stood there. She even gave people a feeling that she could stand there forever. The little girl looked at her and felt scared instinctively. She tried to grab the skirt of the beautiful elder sister beside her, leaning on her legs. It was so cool that it was almost cold. Erex closed his eyes at this time. He seemed to be listening, showing a satisfied look. What was he listening to? Luaccio wanted to know. Suddenly, he had a feeling that Erex was like a mirror, showing him what he looked like at some time. That's right, it's the appearance that I reveal when I saw the beautiful colors. Luaccio didn't stop his curiosity again, just like when he first walked into the club. He also slowly closed his eyes. He knew that if he wanted to hear it, he would hear it. It's impolite to interrupt others' exclusive enjoyment. That was Erex's voice, although you are strong enough that I can't stop all this from happening. But I thought you would be the same as the former boss, without much interest in these things." Luaccio slowly opened his eyes, smiling slightly. He looked at the girl who was still standing there, then sat down again, pointing to the seat beside him, saying, "Sit." The little girl suddenly looked up, but she soon felt sleepy, then closed her eyes. "Finally, we can have a good talk. But before that, allow me to have a meal first, okay?" "Go ahead." Eric's walked in front of her, who was like a statue. His eyes were emitting a faint purple light. It seemed to be devouring something from the girl's body. This made Luaccio more curious. What he was swallowing wasn't something good for the girl, but something bad for her. Erex was swallowing her dreams and nightmares. Erex is a dream-eating tapir. I'm afraid he's the last dream-eating tapir. Miss Maid whispered in Boss Luo's ear. Just like Brubov, Luaccio didn't feel strange that Yi could tell, because she was just a former customer of the club, so there was nothing strange. Erex suddenly turned around at this time, correcting her. "This statement is a bit wrong, Miss Yi. I'm not the last one. I should say the last one and a half. That's because I've been working hard to accumulate transaction fees in order to obtain a companion from your shop. So, since I have this idea, isn't there another half a dream-eating tapir in this world? You're a customer, as long as you're happy." Luaccio thought. But dream-eating tapir, especially to humans' nightmares. A smile slowly appeared on her face. Slowly, she even closed her eyes. Her face became peaceful, and then she fell into Erex's arms. After putting the girl on the sofa and letting her sleep, Erex sat down. He sat in front of Luaccio. There was still a look of satisfaction on his face after enjoying the delicious food. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. He took out a black envelope from his clothes. "That's right. How about this be my transaction fee? I've told this beautiful Miss Maid before I came, and I'll pay for it." Miss Maid took the envelope from Erex's hand and then brought it to her master. Luaccio didn't take it. After glancing at it, he looked at Erex and said, "We didn't do anything, but we have done it." Erex chuckled. The club's boss is like a mirror, reflecting the evil and desire in his heart wherever he stays. Boss Luaccio didn't take the initiative to do anything, but as long as he's by your side, it's enough to save me some trouble. Luaccio nodded. "So you deliberately brought this lady here to borrow my power?" "Master, Mr. Erex used to send people to us whenever he wanted to eat, but didn't want to do it himself. Of course, Mr. Erex will pay for it every time." Yi explained softly. Why did she feel that this guy was a diner who brought his own ingredients, and then she became the chef who helped him with the ingredients? Erex smiled. "This lady is probably just an accident. I met her on the road, and it was about time for me to eat. In fact, I just wanted to send a message to Boss Luaccio." "A message?" Luaccio gave a start. It was impossible for people around him to send him a message through Erex. Of course, it referred to the identity of Luaccio. That was to say, it was another identity. "Who?" "Your ex. Tell me about it." Erex praised. "Boss Luaccio is much calmer than I thought. I thought you would be more surprised." Luaccio said indifferently, "When I was in Moscow, I met an old customer of the club. He sent me this lakeside villa. Nominally, it's for Yi, but..." Luaccio glanced at Yi. "I think it's too quiet here. I found that my ex is the one who can safely stay in this place. That old customer sent it to him. Maybe before I came they talked about it. I'm afraid that the gentleman secretly wrote it down, and this place has been prepared for a long time." Luaccio smiled. "In my line of work, the premonition is more and more clear. My predecessor had been in this position for a longer time than me, so I think he should have some premonition. If he had a premonition that I would come here, then it wouldn't have been too surprising for him to ask someone to bring me a message. Besides," Luaccio said, "since Mr. Erex can come here to send me a message, isn't it because someone told you that I'm here?" Erex listened to him quietly and didn't say anything. But he suddenly said, "Can we talk alone?" "The customer's request?" Luaccio said indifferently. "No." Erex squinted. "I just think it's better this way." "Boss Luaccio, don't you think it's better to talk with fewer people?" "Master, I'll prepare the quilt for you to sleep." Miss Maid whispered to Luaccio at this time. No need. Luaccio shook his head. There's nothing you can't listen to. He doesn't really want you to leave here. Alas, Eric sighed at this time, saying helplessly, so I'm most unwilling to deal with the club boss. Because even if we were the guests, there was no secret to the club's boss, even if it's just a little trick. Speaking of this, Erex suddenly moved closer to Luo, looking at him up and down carefully, asking, "Do you feel bored? You can know as long as you want to know. What does my ex want to say to me?" Luaccio didn't answer, but asked, "The first is to give this envelope to you." Erex smiled and said, "So the real transaction fee I gave is actually the reward for delivering this letter. Boss Luaccio won't mind it, right?" Boss Luo nodded and didn't say anything. This guy didn't even need to give any transaction fee. During the whole process, the two sides didn't even follow the transaction rules set by the club. "Second," he said, Erex recalled, as if he was also in doubt. He said slowly, "Don't try to peek into the future." "Don't peek into the future?" After a long silence, Luaccio nodded. He didn't reveal any thoughts about the words Erex sent to his ex. He just took the black envelope in his hand and said indifferently, "I'll take this." "Besides," Luaccio continued, "where did you meet him?" "I met him occasionally at the Vatican." Erex shrugged. "But I feel that he was waiting for me there. Then he asked me to do this. But I think even if you go to the Vatican, you may not be able to find him." Luaccio really couldn't find his ex directly. Just like the words he found in his ex's room, the price to get all the information was ridiculously high. Any information about his ex's whereabouts was also unimaginable. Apart from Yu Yi, there seemed to be no other way for him to know more about his predecessor. Is he all right? Luaccio felt that his ex might have known the situation and set up a hidden puzzle for him. He couldn't help but have a vague expectation. What would happen when he finally found his ex without the help of the club's intelligence network? "He's getting old." Erex closed his eyes. "Even though he was standing in front of me and talking to me, his time, every minute, every second, was passing by so fast. Old, weak, dying, disappearing." Erex suddenly opened his eyes and smiled. He stood up, put on his hat again, and walked to the side to carry his big leather suitcase. Once again, just like when he first came, he made an exaggerated gesture of thanks and slowly said, "Then, thank you for your hospitality tonight. I'm going to embark on my journey again. I hope I can buy something from you the next time I see Boss Luaccio." Chapter 317. At the moment when Erex turned around and left, Luaccio moved his line of sight. The so-called 26 dream-eating taper was actually a taper, right? Erex's back seemed to have changed a little, becoming bloated, and the pair of hands exposed from the sleeves seemed to have become hooves. Perhaps its nose was elongated like an elephant's trunk, but it was much shorter. Luaccio blinked. Erex's back was like a projection with a new film, returning to its original appearance. Finally, he opened the door and walked out, never looking back. He had already completed his mission, which was to deliver something to his predecessor. He had also unexpectedly obtained a portion of food that could be considered delicious. He should be in a good mood. But if he just left like this, wouldn't it mean leaving a mess here? Were all the previous customers so capricious? Luaccio suddenly asked curiously. If it was a customer, Miss Maid wouldn't deliberately discredit him. She tried to maintain the perspective of a bystander. Mr. Erex is a relatively special one among the customers who have done many transactions. He won't stay in one place for too long, but is always on the road. Luaccio subconsciously looked at the girl lying on the sofa. After her nightmares were eaten, she became so peaceful. Miss Maid suddenly said, "However, after the nightmare taper eats the nightmare, it doesn't leave a beautiful dream." Luaccio looked at his maid curiously. "It just eats this part of the nightmare, so that the person whose dream is eaten will have the idea of no more similar." Therefore, what the meeting taper ate was perhaps the prayer of hoping that hope would not appear again. And for the person whose dream is eaten, her roots are still there. Looking at her master blinking his eyes, Miss Maid tried to explain in more detail. For example, humans plant fruit trees. Every time after the fruit is harvested, the tree itself is still there, and it will still bear fruit. Master, you don't understand? Luaccio shook his head. No, I'm just thinking that you always know a lot. Well, she woke up. However, when she woke up, she did not become clearer because the nightmare had been eaten. She rubbed the space between her eyebrows and looked around blankly. It was still the same living room, the owner of the small villa, the maid, and the sleeping little girl, Lena. Gloria hadn't woken up yet either. She was still sleeping on the other end of the sofa. Did I fall asleep? Allie patted her forehead gently. I think I had a dream. A little. The confusion in her eyes deepened. Luaccio asked, a little bit of what? A little. Allie frowned, but soon shook her head. Nothing. Oh, haven't Branham and the others come back yet? Luaccio nodded. In fact, I haven't seen Mr. Branham and Len appear together. Is that so? She instinctively thought that he meant that Branham and Len hadn't come back yet. As for this strange expression, it was probably because he was not familiar with Russian grammar and occasionally made mistakes. Although she always felt that it was incredible that this young villa owner could have such a pure native accent. Oh, when did I fall asleep? Allie tried hard to recall her previous memory. Oh, did you ask me a question just now? You are Miss Allie? Luaccio suddenly asked. Haven't I introduced myself before? Allie showed a stunned look and shook her head. Your question is really strange. Luaccio smiled. I'm sorry. You can take it as my occupational disease. I always need to talk about some problems with my customers. Well, it's a kind of consulting work. This is because although many customers are often eager for something, they are unable to clearly grasp what they want. Allie frowned and said, but you can't guarantee that what you're guiding is what the customer really wants. Isn't this too subjective? Bystanders are always clearer. Luaccio whispered, but Miss Allie is right. I can't guarantee this, so the customer is still the one who determines what they want. You don't tell me you're a psychiatrist or something like that. Allie smiled and said, you give me this kind of feeling. Of course, I don't mean to make fun of you or anything else. In fact, it's quite interesting to chat with you. It's not so boring. Thank you. Allie stretched herself, as if she suddenly became more energetic, like what Branham said. There's always a mysterious color in the East. Are you not ordinary people? It was like a joke for Allie at this time, but it was just a joke to make this place not so boring. Luaccio casually glanced at the window outside the living room, and then looked at Allie. If we are businessmen who can sell anything to customers, do you think we are ordinary people? Anything? Allie gave a start, seeming to think about the scope of the so-called anything. Yes, anything. As long as the customer can imagine and afford it, we will sell it. Of course, as a customer, you can choose not to buy it, because the choice is always on the customer. Allie blinked her eyes, suddenly biting her finger. Well, isn't this statement a bit problematic? For example, the customer does have the choice to not buy it. But, except from you, the customer has no other way to buy what he wants from other sellers. Well, in this case, the customer has no autonomy, right? And if he really needs this kind of thing, he can't choose not to buy it, right? It's like a monopoly. This was the first customer who would discuss this issue with the club's boss, Luo. All the characteristics of a top student? Allie smiled and said, that's why you guys can't sell everything. This statement is too exaggerated. To be exact, you only sell things that the customer can afford. And if the customer can't afford it, then it doesn't exist. So the so-called everything can be sold should be a kind of magnified slogan similar to an advertisement. We can sell everything, Luaccio said indifferently. Although the part that the customer can buy depends on the customer's purchasing power, as the supplier, we don't have the concept of no. At least that's what I've been in contact with so far. You say it like it's true. Allie shook her head, casually saying, if I say that I feel my life is very bad, can you sell me a very good life? How much money do I need to pay for a happy life? Besides, if life can be measured by money, and I have this wealth, why should I buy it from you? Because of this. Luaccio smiled. We don't charge any money. No money? Allie gave a start. Then how do you make a profit? Health, sanity, friendship, love? Luaccio said slowly. Even a soul. These are all our ways of making a profit. For a moment, Allie felt cold in her body. Her arms, her thighs, the skin that could not be seen under her clothes, even her forehead and cheeks, all of them had a slightly numb feeling. Subconsciously, She had a feeling that this might be true. This feeling lasted for a short time, because a rapid knock on the door suddenly woke her up. Allie stood up in a flurry. It should be Branham who came back. I'll open the door. Branham. At the moment when the door was opened, Allie suddenly stopped talking. She didn't see Branham, but two men in police uniforms. The two men in police uniforms saw Allie and came forward without saying anything. They pressed Allie to the ground and handcuffed her hands. Chapter 3:18. Allie's arms were clasped by two police officers, and her mouth was gagged with a cloth strip. A policeman was tightly holding her arms behind her back to prevent her from escaping. Allie's eyes were full of panic and uneasiness, as well as tears. Another policeman looked back at the door of the villa and said loudly, "The patient is caught. Madam, sir, you can come in and find her daughter." With that, a figure quickly rushed into the room. It was Mrs. Maggie. Mrs. Maggie was limping around the room. When she saw that her daughter was sleeping on the sofa, she was relieved. She quickly walked to her daughter and held her in her arms. "Mom!" Little Lena woke up and rubbed her eyes. Seeing her mother, she shouted happily. At the same time, the little girl also heard a voice from the other side. Her father's voice, "Dad." "Lena." Another figure came in from outside. It was the father of the little girl that Luaccio saw on the train. There were many scars on the man's face, as if his skin was cut by something. His forehead was covered with gauze, but there was also blood oozing out. The man was very dirty, as if he had rolled on the ground. He quickly came to the mother and daughter, hugging them both at the same time, and said happily, "Great. That's great. I was so afraid that you were in danger. Great." Mrs. Maggie's husband's eyes were even a little wet. "Don't move." The policeman who was holding Allie shouted at this time, "Do you want to cause more trouble?" Allie struggled more excitedly, but with her mouth gagged, she could only make a whining sound. "Can someone explain it to me?" Luaccio asked softly. Another policeman came up and glanced at him. "Are you the owner of this house?" Luaccio nodded casually. The policeman pointed at the detained Ellie and said, "This woman suddenly went crazy a year ago. She stabbed a few of her classmates with a knife and was caught. Later, she was diagnosed with a serious psychological disorder and violent tendencies. She has escaped from the hospital several times already, and this time is no exception." Luaccio nodded. The policeman looked at the time on his wrist. "Yes, yesterday afternoon, the woman successfully escaped again. She knocked out a driver at a nearby gas station, then stole the driver's car and ran away. After we received the report, we tracked the car's GPS and found this place. At the same time, I also found Mr. Markin." The policeman shrugged and said, "But this Mr. Markin is quite pitiful. When he was relieving himself, he bumped into this woman who had escaped here. Then, he was attacked by her and fainted. But as you know, this woman has a serious mental disorder. She doesn't have the ability to act normally. Even if you want to sue her, I'm afraid it'll end in nothing. He's fine as long as he's fine." Mr. Markin shook his head. He glanced at Ellie and sighed. "This girl is quite pitiful. I won't pursue the matter." "Oh, thank you for your generosity, sir." The police officer immediately smiled. He had a smile. If he didn't pursue the matter, it would reduce his workload. How could he not be happy? Markin didn't say anything. He just combed his daughter's hair lovingly, as if he was afraid that she would be frightened. Mrs. Maggie looked around and asked curiously, "By the way, where's Mr. Erex? When I went out with him to find my husband, I accidentally fell into a pit and twisted my foot. Fortunately, I met the two police officers who tracked us here. We chatted for a while and found out that Miss Ellie is a patient." The two police officers were afraid that Ellie would run away if they broke in, so they asked Erex to come back first to check the situation, but they didn't receive any news for a long time. Therefore, they had to bring the Markin couple back quietly. The two police officers leaned against the window of the villa and peeped for a while. They saw that Ellie was talking with the young owner of the house. She looked quite calm, so they directly knocked on the door to arrest her. "Officer, my wife and I are on vacation this time. We brought our daughter back to visit her grandmother, so I don't want to waste time." Markin sighed. "Besides, I don't want to pursue the matter. After all, she's just a patient. So we can skip the injury examination, right? Can I make a statement here? I don't want to go to the police station. I'm afraid that I'll waste a day of my vacation. The police considered for a while and said, okay, but you have to write a letter of guarantee that you're willing to do this. We don't want you to blame us for being irresponsible if you have any problems in the future. Because you're willing to do this, okay? Markin thought for a while and nodded slightly. Then let's start the detailed statement. The police officer took out a pen and paper and a recording pen. You can tell us what happened again. Markin said slowly. It was almost sunset. I was in the forest beside the road and was about to... Oh, I suddenly saw a shadow flash by. I was startled at that time, thinking that I had bumped into something. But I found that it was a woman. I felt strange at that time because she was walking alone as if she had something on her mind. In short, it was a very bad state. I tried to call her twice, but she didn't respond, so I walked forward. But I didn't expect. Markin touched the wound on his forehead. She suddenly pounced on me like a madwoman. In the scuffle, she hit me here with a stone, and then I lost consciousness. The police nodded and recorded it carefully. Officer, can't you remove the cloth from Miss Ellie's face? I think she wants to say something. Luaccio looked at Allie at this time. The police officer said casually, no need. What if she bites her tongue? The mental hospital said that she had tried to commit suicide several times. Besides, the words of mental patients have no legal effect. There was nothing wrong with the police officer's statement. Suddenly, Ellie broke free from the hands of the other police officer who was holding her down. Her mouth was gagged, so she could only make a low but unusually powerful groan. Her hands were locked behind her back, but she used her body crazily, seemingly trying to hit the door. She probably wanted to say something, but no one knew what she wanted to say. The cloth in her mouth had blocked her from communicating with others. However, since she couldn't move freely, she was quickly pressed to the ground by the two police officers. Allie twisted her body crazily on the ground. She raised her head so hard that her teeth clenched the cloth in her mouth. Her eyeballs were about to burst out from her eye sockets. Her crazy struggle made her cheeks full of blood. She just stared at Luaccio. Her eyes were full of endless pleading. She kept her eyes open. Her body was dragged by the two police officers, but she still kept her eyes open without blinking until she was dragged out of the villa's door. The statement is done, Mr. Markin. I hope you can keep your phone turned on. We'll contact you if there's anything. One of the police officers turned around and said, we're taking a patient back now, and we're also returning this lost car to the owner. Have a good holiday, Mr. Markin. When Allie was pushed onto the police car, her head suddenly hit the window glass, as if she wanted to break through the glass and get out of it. She still kept her eyes open until the car was far away and she couldn't see it anymore. Then Miss Maid gently closed the door. On the lawn outside, there was only a faint light in the house, and a little dark green could be seen. I didn't expect to meet you here. After a long while, Markin, Mrs. Maggie's husband, said something and broke the silence. He smiled and said, originally, we were supposed to cross this road directly. I didn't expect to stop midway. Mrs. Maggie glanced at the wounds on her husband's body and then hurriedly said, excuse me, is there a first aid kit here? I think my husband needs to clean these wounds. And I'm afraid we can only stay here tonight. We're fine, but... She glanced at her daughter. Such a small child, she was afraid that she was frightened. As a mother, she needed a quiet and comfortable environment to comfort her daughter. I'll find a first aid kit. Yi smiled and walked away. At this time, Markin found that the owner of this small villa seemed to be looking at him all the time. There was something on his face that he couldn't describe. This caused him to become nervous all of a sudden. When he was looked at by this kind of indescribably strange gaze and faintly discernible smile, a strange kind of uneasiness surfaced in his heart. Excuse me, can I use the bathroom here? Markin pulled his collar. I think I want to clean myself. Luaccio smiled, pointing at the bathroom. Over there. I'll ask someone to prepare a towel for you, sir. Markin nodded. He didn't want to stay in front of this young, oriental man for a while. He didn't know why, but he lowered his head and quickly walked to the bathroom. Maggie, you come and clean yourself and bring Lena here. He turned back and said, when there was only Luaccio in the living room, he sat down again and opened the black envelope left by Arex. From inside, Luaccio took out a palm-sized black card. The horn of the black card stood upright in Luaccio's palm. This card slowly rotated in his palm. Looking at it, Luaccio was lost in thought. Suddenly, Boss Luo's eyes became sharp. The black coating on the black card was completely peeled off in a flash, and it turned into a gold and silver card that emitted a faint gold and silver color. The second one. The police car in front suddenly stopped, and the police officer driving the stolen car had to stop as well. The police officer in front pulled Allie out of the back seat. The police officer in the back also got off the car and walked forward. This was a quiet place. Both ends of the road were like cliffs swallowed by darkness, with no end in sight. However, they still looked at their surroundings. The police officer in front sneered and looked at his partner. His partner also nodded. The two ignored the girl's struggle and dragged her into the woods. They chained her hands to a tree trunk. One of them began to take off his pants, and the other began to undress Allie. But he stopped halfway. Wait, what? I've taken off my pants, and you want me to stop? Do you want to do it first? The other one was dissatisfied. No, look at her. Isn't she a bit strange? Since just now, to be exact, since she was locked on the tree trunk, this girl didn't make any movement. She just opened her eyes wide without blinking, as if she couldn't blink. I keep feeling that something is wrong. The one who stopped frowned. This woman's eyes are making me feel uncomfortable. The one who had taken off his pants directly wrapped his pants around Allie's eyes and patted her face, grinning. Isn't this good? Let's finish it quickly, then clean her body and take her back. Don't worry, she's just a psychopath. No matter what she says, no one will believe it. Saying this, he leaned on Allie's body and began to suck her neck. He had become excited. He had touched the place where he was about to penetrate and felt more excited. All of a sudden, he felt an unprecedented pain coming from his ear. Ah! He screamed once and then kept screaming. He painfully covered his right ear. His entire earlobe had been bitten off, and half of his face was covered in blood. Ah! The cloth stuffed in the girl's mouth had been spat out, and her mouth was already stained with blood. She was chewing a broken ear. The handcuffs that locked her were suddenly broken, and the girl tore off the pants on her face, revealing her scarlet eyes. Her eye sockets were cracking. Scarlet eyes, and her mouth was also cracking. Monster! They had been scared to death and collapsed on the ground, kicking their legs in horror, trying to retreat. But she suddenly rushed over and directly inserted her hands into one of their chests, tearing it open. The remaining police officer was too terrified. He could barely think. He didn't even notice that on the back of the girl who had suddenly turned into a monster, there was an ancient parchment scroll that had been opened. Perhaps he couldn't see it at all, because this was not something he could see.